My name is Bruce Olio. We represent the European School of Design, which is the name of our company. The address is on your letter that we sent you. Now, we're going to hold the class in 3 separate parts. The first part of the class, we're going to be in the leaflet that we gave you. It says make perfect patterns in minutes. First part of the class, we're going to show you a European method, a method that a lot of the European countries are using on making your own patterns at home that fit. We're going to show you this method, one short lesson. It said something about pattern making in the letter. It says we're going to show you an amazing pattern making method that allows you to create unlimited designs, contour to your own body requirements. It says if you bring the letter to the class, which I'm sure everybody did, it says we're going to give you 3 free pattern designs which you can make to fit your own measurement. See, if we gave everybody a standard size pattern like you now are familiar with working with, what would happen if we gave you a standard size pattern? It would fit some of you. It would fit exactly 20% of you. What would happen to the other 80% it wouldn't fit? Well, you'd have to try to adjust it anyway. So this is what this leaflet has to do with, and this is what we're going to do in the first part of the class. We're going to show you how to take the little tiny designs that are on this leaflet and make them into big ones. We'll show you how to take that little tiny pattern, make it into your pattern. Now, you've heard all your life, if you want things done right, what do? Yeah, you do it yourself. So in the first part of the class, we're going to show you how you can make a pattern custom fit to your own measurements. How many of you in here would like to make patterns that fit? Put your hands up. Put them down, put them back up again. It's good exercise. That was a silly question, wasn't it? Well, that's exactly what we're going to show you how you can do in the first part of the class. Then we'll cover the second part of the class, which has to do with pattern designing. We'll show you how we do this pattern designing. So if you want to be your own designer, you can, because it's really very simple. How many of you would like to be your own designer? A few of you would. Well, that's exactly what we're going to show you how you can do in the second part of the class. Then we'll cover the third part of the class, which has to do with the sewing techniques that it mentioned in the letter. We're going to tell you a new technique on how to sew. Sleeves, collars, shoulders, side seams. We'll explain several different feet that most of you have never heard of before. They're invaluable if you have a sewing machine at home. We'll explain why you have trouble with zippers, how you can possibly repair them if they're broken. Then the very last thing we'll do with the class is we'll show you another method you can use on how you can make perfectly fitting slacks. How many of you came to class because you have a problem with slacks? A few of you. I think that most people come to class say that slacks are the easiest things to sew, but for most people they're the hardest things to fit, aren't they? This is what a lot of people say. So the very last thing we'll do is we'll show you another method you can use on how you can make perfectly fitting slacks. You know, right now I want you to open this leaflet to the page of the waistcoat. Back in the old days we used to call these waistcoats or vest. That's the middle page right here. Okay, now there's 3 ways that you can make and design a pattern to fit your own measurement. Well, there's actually only 2 ways. The method we'll show you here today. Number 1, pattern makers, tailors, designers, we spend minimum of 6 months of specialized schooling, learn this pattern making and designing. These specialized schools are a lot of fun. Has anybody ever attended a specialized school for pattern making? There's a few people now and then. These specialized schools, they're a lot of fun, but we found that most people that sew at home, first of all, really don't have time to be going to a specialized school, or there's extensive, very expensive study courses you can take through the mail. You'll find those advertised in some of the sewing magazines on how you can learn how to make a pattern custom fit to your own measurement. The problem is once you get the courses home, you have to know geometry, trigonometry, algebra. You have to learn the proper use of a slide rule. You have to learn how to use calibrated squares and scales, measure your body in 23 places. There's a lot of people that come to class that know how to make a pattern to fit their own measurement. It takes about an hour and a half, sometimes even 2 hours, to compute one plain Jane dress pattern on a blank sheet of paper, but it fits when we get all done. Or there's a method that's currently being used in Europe and the Orient, which has been used for several decades, which is the simplest and easiest method of pattern making and designing that we can find to show the people that sew at home at this time. This is called the Golden Rule. How many of you have ever heard of this before? A few of you have been to class before? We've had the class here several times before. Last time we had one, we've had the class here several times before. A lot of you may have been to the class before. Outside the United States have been making patterns of this method in France, Germany, England, Australia, Italy, Spain, South Africa, Sweden, Canada, Mexico. This method is currently being used in 37 different countries and in 25 different languages. If you live in a lot of those countries, you'll be able to get this kind of a pattern I'm going to show you. A lot of the major fabric shops, the finer department store, we have our designers will put on pattern making classes where people like to make a pattern custom fit to their own measurement. And when the people are buying a set of patterns in a foreign country, they don't have to pay what? What are patterns nowadays? $5 each for a set of patterns? $15 to $20 they charge for Vogue Designer pattern, which are really just more pattern pieces. And you'll see that in the designing part of the class. What happens over in Europe, people buy what we call a current fashion supplement full of patterns. See, 4 times every year, in the spring, summer, fall, and winter, we have our designers in Europe that make up new ideas. We have our mathematicians that will figure out all the numbers you're looking at around the designs you have in those leaflets. On the first page of one of these current fashion supplements, which I have up here, this happens to be a winter supplement. There's a model. And on the back, there's a little tiny miniature design. Now, if you notice, there is quite a difference in this method of patterns and the patterns that you know about. Of course, if you notice the patterns on your leaflets, they're in a miniature form. And if you notice the other difference on those patterns we gave you, we use the international means of measuring with our method, which is the metric system. Centimeters. You don't have to know anything about a centimeter. All you have to do is know how to read. If you can read the numbers that are around the designs you have on your leaflets, can you read the numbers? Well, if you can read the numbers that are around those designs you have in your leaflets, then you'll be able to make these patterns. So don't close your mind because of a centimeter. Now I'm going to explain how we make the pattern, why they fit so nice, and I'll actually go ahead and make the waistcoat real quick for one of the ladies so that you can see how this will work for you when you get the few patterns you have in your hands home. How we're able to make the pattern, why they fit so nice, it goes back to a number of years ago. There was a man studying the human anatomy. You know what the human anatomy is? The study of your body. Leonardo da Vinci was the guy's exact name. And he discovered that the human body and face is in mathematical proportion to itself. A lot of you in here have heard that before. Human body's in proportion to itself, and there's only 3 figure types for man or woman. There's only 3 figure types, endomorph, ectomorph, and esomorph. If you know anything about artwork or drawing human figures, you would. What did you used to buy to wrap around your fist? You used to go to the clothing store, see if you get the right size. What was that? Wrap a sock around your fist, that's the size of your foot. Twice around your wrist is the width of your neck. Length of your nose, your forehead, your ear, and this area here, all the same. Size one of your eyes, same distance between your eyes. Length of your hands, length of your face. Fingertip to fingertips, your body height. Your body's 8 heads high. Distance from your chin to your navel is exactly the same from knee to your ankle. From here to there, same from here to there. Hold your arms out like this. Look at the distance from here to there, and that's the size of your foot. I can't help it if you have a big foot. Doesn't it look big? That's no joke. It's the size of your foot. See, if you close it up now, it looks a lot better. In fact, when you go home, put your shoe in there, it looks a little better. A lot of you go to the fabric store and get a yard, tip your nose, your finger. That might not be exactly yard, but it's pretty close. We can stand up here and rattle these things off 59 times faster. We just did. Top of your eyebrows equal top of your ear. Right there, we index finger bends, length of your nose. Somebody told me twice around your neck is your waist. There are exceptions to these things, isn't there? Some of us are born with deformity. Some of us have operations. Some of us have extreme figure-type problems of some kind. Now, by knowing the human bodies are in proportion to themselves, this has been reduced to 2 measurements. See, the only 2 measurements you need to take to make the designs you have in the leaflet, it tells you right on your leaflet there, doesn't it? Bust and the hip. Now, we're going to measure differently than you've ever seen. We're going to measure the biggest part of one of you above the waist. Biggest part of you above the waist. Isn't that a circle? Say yes if you understand. Blink your eyes, wiggle your nose, move your ears, nod your head, stick your tongue out, do something so know you're following along. We're also going to measure the biggest part of one of you below the waist. Biggest part of you below the waist, that's a circle too. Remember in math class who would teach you all about the circles? If you know the distance around the circle, which is called the circumference, there's special formula to find out what's inside. Pi r squared is not one of them. There's formulas to find anything you want to know about the circle. See, the same ideas have been applied to all those numbers you're looking at around the designs you have on your leaflets. By knowing the human bodies are in proportion to themselves, there are 6 mathematical formulas that are used to compute the numbers, whereas by measuring like we do and finding out what's around you in these 2 places, we can pretty much figure out what's inside. I don't think you want a lesson in geometry. I think you want to see the results. Who cares how it works? We're going to show you how nice it does work. So what we're going to do is make the waistcoat for one of the ladies of the class. The only reason for making a waistcoat is when we get into the class a little bit later on, some of you in here, you're going to like the idea so well on how to make pattern to your own measurement, designing your own pattern, that you're going to want to take it further rather than just the few patterns we gave you. So you have a few patterns in your hand which you can make. You have a vest on the front there. You have a blouse and a pair of shorts on the back there. Then you're going to have a slack pattern on this separate sheet we gave you. If you like the idea of making a pattern to your own measurement, designing your own pattern, you can look through the rest of these designs later. Now when you measure to make the pattern, you should measure in foundation garments. That means without your clothes on, so we need a lady volunteer. We don't do the foundation garments here at the class for obvious reasons. That's why we have to make the waistcoat. You understand why we make the waistcoat? Because it's an outer garment, it's a sleeveless jacket, it's going to fit like a coat. I'm going to explain how it's going to fit now. And normally we don't know who we're going to make it for. The shoulder seam on the waistcoat will be a little bigger than your normal set-in shoulder. More important shoulder is the armhole. Armhole will drop way down under here to accommodate a bulky sleeve or sweater. It'll fit like a coat in the shoulder and armhole area. Watch to see if it doesn't when we try it on to Minnie. So Minnie, come on up here. Okay, you can stand right about there. Face me. Put your arms up like you're down on 42nd Street, New York, just like that. That's good. Anybody measure themselves like that? I haven't found one person yet. Now with your arms up, they have to have somebody help you. Okay, put your arms down. That's good. Now you see where the tape goes? You see how high that is? When you measure, make the patterns, you get the tape across the broadest part of the back, get the shoulder blades in there. Men, children are measured the same way to make the pattern like we're showing you. Now it's no mistake the pattern fits back here. You can see why we have the measurement. Tied up underneath the arms is in that first place a lot of bigger people gain weight. These will fit there too. Okay, turn around the front, Minnie. This way. Keep your arms down. High across the back, tied up underneath the arms. Then you take it across the broadest part in the front. Now to get a proper measurement, just take the tape, pull it up tight, leave it loose as you want to. You don't stick your fingers in there for ease lines. These things have already been figured out. Minnie measures 110 centimeters. Okay, hold on a second. Let me write that down. 110. Does everybody understand how to get the proper measurement? High across the back, tied up underneath the arms, across the broadest part in front. See, the difference the way you have to measure, make the patterns we gave you, the way most of you now measure. Half of you measure straight across the back here. The only difference is we measure across the highest part in the back. We've still taken it across the biggest part in the front. That's easy enough. Now the next measure concerned with to make slack skirts, bottoms, or dresses is what we'll call a hip measurement, or the biggest part of you below the waist. Now you can do this one on your own because of course you can see down here. Where do you measure the hips? There's a little rule you want to follow. The little rule is this. If you intend to cover it, we suggest you measure it. So what's that mean? That means the biggest part. What you do is go right below the waist. Okay, stand right there. Face the people. Put your feet together. Put your arms just like that. That's good. Turn this way just a little bit so everybody can see. What you do is go right below the waist. You put the tape across the biggest part of your backside, biggest part of your derriere, wherever that's the biggest. Then you take it over the biggest lump on your hip. Some people's hips are down here, some middle and some up higher. Then you take it right up to your waist, right up to the biggest part. That's 116. Okay, thank you, man. You can have a seat. I'll do it again on me in case you missed it. You put the tape across the biggest part of your backside, biggest part of your derriere, wherever that's the biggest. Then you take it over the biggest lump on your hip. Some people's hips are down here, some middle and some up higher. Then you take it right up to your waist or right up to the biggest part. That way, if you have one of these, or both, we've got you covered. What was that number, 116? Now, if you notice, Minnie has a problem right. She's a little bit different from top to bottom. Who doesn't have that problem? Isn't that one of the biggest fitting problems that some people have when they get a pattern? Get one that fits up here, right, and it won't fit down here. Get one that fits down here, doesn't fit up here. So in this part of the class, when you make a pattern to your own measurement, we can take care of a two-size problem, different from top to bottom. And I'll point that out in a little while. Okay, is everybody on the page of the waistcoat? Okay, what you do as soon as you can, you want to rip your whole page off your leaflet like I'm going to do here. You know, you make your waistcoat first for practice because, of course, practice makes perfect. You make this waistcoat first because that's the one we make here at the class and that's the one we make on the tape. You pin your little pattern down somewhere about the center of your board. What kind of board is this? It's a pattern making board or pattern cutting board. Most of you have a board like this anyway. You know, they don't lay flat when they're new. You don't have to have this board to make the pattern. You can get an old box or piece of plywood or whatever you want. What kind of paper to use? Well, we carry some paper along in the class which is called vellum paper. This just happens to be the same vellum paper that's special manufactured for garment industry, for pattern making. It's a lot stronger than tissue paper, make a ready-made pattern on. It's wide enough for any pattern, front or back. Now, we really shouldn't use the vellum paper in the class to make the pattern. The reason we shouldn't use it in the class is when I tape it down on the board, you can see right through it. A lot of times if there's a real large class, the ones in the back, they can't see anything but the board under there. Then they think the board has something to do with making that pattern. You understand that board under there with those squares and lines doesn't have a thing to do with making those patterns you have in your hands? Okay, good. What's the advantage of being able to see through it? Of course, if you have designs you want to match on cloth, you can see what you're doing. You ever try to put a piece of tape on a commercial pattern when adjusting it and take it off? What happens sometimes? Sometimes it destroys your pattern. Well, so you could tape this up all day long. You could write on it with a magic marker without it coming through because it's wax coated. It can also be used to correct your present patterns you already have at home. How would you use it for that? You know, like to preserve them as well as making your own. You'll be able to order some vellum paper off the video because unless you're a paper distributor or you've been to this class before, the only way you can get vellum paper, roll like this, it starts off in a roll like this. Then we even had to have an engineer design machine puts it on little rolls. I call it fabric paper. If you hold it up to the light and look at it, it's a rag content. There's enough paper on one of these rolls to make or adjust at least 8 to 10 full sets of patterns. And on the average, most of you make about 7 garments a year. Now we're going to make the waistcoat. For many, it fits above the waist. So of course we're concerned with what numbers to make the waistcoat. I didn't tell you, but I think you can figure that out. We'd actually use both those numbers for the waistcoat. Why would we use both the numbers? It has a waistline on it. See the broken line on your pattern, the dotted line? That's the waist. Everything Minnie makes above the waist, if it fits above the waist, like a bodice, a sleeve, a collar, only number she needs is 110. If it fits below the waist, like slacks, shorts, culotte, skirt, everything fits below the waist, the only number she needs is 116. Most of you have 2 different numbers because you are different from top to bottom. If you happen to have the same number, don't worry about it. Okay, go to the front page of your leaflet where it shows you the special scale. On your leaflet there, we've supplied you with a special scale. Now, if you notice the scale has numbers on it. See how it starts at 50? Then it goes all the way up to 140. The numbers on the scale represent the graduation of the people's measurement. Not only that, they are the proportion of the human body. We can make a pattern for 50 centimeters around. You know how small it is? That's that big, that's 18 inches around. Or we can make a pattern for 140 centimeters around. That's equivalent to 58 inches around. We hope everybody falls between the 50, which is 18 inches, and the 140, which is 58 inches. Most everybody is safely within that range. So your pattern to your own personal measurement and body proportion, it can be made using the scale. Now you see the big number 8 at the bottom of the scale? Does everybody see that? Okay, good. Forget about that for the moment. See the little numbers, how they jog back and forth? 50, 52, 54, 56, 58. 2, 4, 6, 8. Notice they go in twos. So what if you measured 51? There's no odd numbers on the scale at all. So if you measure an odd number, when you measure your bust and hip like we've shown you, round it off to the highest even number. If I've measured Minnie 109, I go to 110. Now the scale I have up here, of course, is a plastic one. We gave you the paper one so you can make the patterns you have. So you don't use it in paper like that. It'll break down and you aren't going to have it. What you do as soon as you can, you want to cut your scale off your leaflet. You want to reinforce it with a piece of plastic, tape, contact paper, cardboard. Make sure that you reinforce that scale a little bit. Fasten the scale to the 8 centimeter side of your tape measure. Oh, where do you get a tape in centimeters? That's no problem. You can't find the tapes, don't have centimeters on them anymore. See, like this one. They put centimeters on one side, inches are on the other side. See how my tape measure doesn't start till the 9th centimeter? You understand why the tape doesn't start till 9? Because the white scale covers the first 8 numbers on the centimeter side of your tape. It shows you right on that leaflet there, doesn't it? It shows you right there. Don't ruin that scale we gave you. Don't ruin the scale we gave you, or you're out of business. See, it's part of the equipment necessary in order to make those patterns. See the scale we gave you and those few designs are the key to making the few patterns. You probably already have this centimeter tape measure at home already. Now we're going to make the waistcoat for Minnie. It fits above the waist, so of course we're concerned with number 110. We've already talked about that. Okay, find 110 on your scale. Okay, there it is. Now the correct one is the line next to your number. So find 110, find a line next to 110. You see the line that's next to 110? You have to come all the way out to the edge, stick the tack, a little dot. Tack is actually on what color line? It's on the red line. Is that clear to everyone? That's the hardest part about the whole thing because it's the line next to your number. Now the tack's in the scale according to the line next to 110, which is the red line, which is the biggest part of mini above the waist, because we're going to make the waistcoat, it fits above the waist. Everybody go back to the page of the waistcoat. Now does everybody see the cross or X on the front of the waistcoat or plus sign? It's sort of hidden there in the center of the pattern. You see it there? It's sort of hidden in the center of the pattern there. Does everybody see the cross or X? What does X usually do? It marks a spot, right? So see, if X marks a spot, you see what I'm going to do with the tack with a special scale? I'm going to place it right in the middle of the cross or X the pattern I'm going to make, see, because X marks a spot. See, it's like pin the tail on the donkey, except you don't have blindfold on. Put the tack right into the middle of the X. Now you see what we have? We have a tape and scale that revolves around the little miniature design. Now you can start anywhere, go anywhere, doesn't matter. I'm going to start at the bottom neckline. At the center front, where the buttons are, where it says 19. Isn't that 19 sitting on a little projecting line? There's a little angle line there, isn't there? Can everybody watch as best you can? See this white scale? I'm going to swing the scale till it lines up flush with the projecting line that says 19. Line the scale up along a line. See, the line determines the angle you come down the tape. What's the number on the line say? It says 19. If everybody could see the tape measure, can you find the number 19 on the tape? You can find number 19, right? Well, then you can make the patterns we gave you. So all you have to do is find 19 on the tape, make a dot. So all you have to do is read numbers and make dots. That's all there is to it. So you see what the white scale's for? See what the little projecting lines extending out your miniature design are for. The white scale and the projecting line, they meet. They come together. All you have to do is copy each projecting line and the number that's on that line. So see what the white scale's for? So you can copy the lines in numbers. Now you can go anywhere, start anywhere, doesn't matter. I'm going to go clockwise. Next I'm going clockwise is what, 19 and a half? I mean 19.5? Same thing as a half, isn't it? Now listen, how do you know how far apart to go to make the next dot? Yeah, that's the next projecting line in your miniature design. See the white scale? Swing it till it lines up along the next projecting line. Line the scale up along the line. See, the line determines the angle you come down the tape. It says 19.5. You find 19.5 on the tape, make a dot. We don't ever give you anything smaller than 0.5, which is the medium-sized notch between the big ones, so you don't have to try to count the little tiny notches. See what the lines on that pattern also tell you? How far apart to go to make each dot. I'll start all over. First one's 19. Line the scale up along the line, 19 and make a dot. How do you know how far apart to go to make the next dot? That's the next projecting line in your miniature design. See the white scale? Swing it till it lines up along the next line, 19.5, make a dot. You understand, all you do is read numbers and make dots. It's easy as pie. It's a piece of cake, but it's also new, so you have to practice your waistcoat a few times. Next one's what, 11? Line the scale up along the line, 11 to make a dot. What's that 11 for? Way down inside the patterns. Anybody knows? Anybody want to guess? The 11 is the point for the shoulder dart. See the point down there for the shoulder dart? That's what the 11 is. Put it this way. Anytime you see a line anywhere near the pattern, if it has a number, you don't pass it up because it'll have to do with the pattern. The 11 is the point for the dart. Doesn't 11 have its own projecting line? It's another one just like all the other ones. So what's the white scale for? So you can line it up along the projecting line. It says 11. Line the scale up along the line. The number on the line says 11. So what do you do now? You find 11 on the tape, make a dot. You understand that's the point for the dart? If you'd forgotten to mark your 11, you know what would happen when you went to line your pattern in? You wouldn't have any point to line your dart in. When you fit your pattern on your shoulder would be way too big. Next one's what, 37.5? Line the scale up along the line, 37.5, make a dot. Fun, it's a lot of fun just making dots. There's the neckline made, isn't it? Isn't that the neckline? Next is what, 36? Line the scale up along the line, 36 and make a dot. Next is what, 35? Line the scale up along the line, 35, make a dot. Now look at this. The top 2 points for the shoulder dart are made, aren't they? See the top 2 points for the dart? See what the 11 is now? That's the point of the dart. Isn't the dart made? There's a dart made, isn't it? Next one's what, 33? Line the scale up along the line, 33 a megadot. What's the next one? 19. Line the scale up along the line, 19 a megadot. Next one's 15. Line the scale up along the line, 15 a megadot. Next one's 18. Line the scale up along the line, 18 a megadot. Now look, here's the armhole made, isn't it? Isn't that the armhole? Just that fast. Just that fast. Now we did the 18 at the bottom of the armhole already, didn't we? We did the 18 at the bottom of the armhole already. Now the broken line on your pattern, see the dotted line? That's the waist. Next one with the waist is 18. Line the scale up along the line. It says 18. You find 18 on the tape, make a dot. See, all the bodice dots, including the waist up, are made to number 110. The tack is still on the scale, according to the line next to 110 when I mark this waist dot 18, isn't it? Now, as far as your question is concerned, some of you are thinking about the short and long waist. You're way ahead of me what you're thinking about right now. Just hold on, and as we go along here, we'll be covering every one of your questions. Everybody understand, including the waist up is marked to 110. Tack is still on the scale according to the line next to 110 when I mark the waist dot 18, isn't it? Okay, now, Minnie's a little different below the waist, isn't she? Well, who isn't? Remember we said we're making a pattern to your own measurement. We can take care of a two-size problem, different from top to bottom. How do we take care of that? That's no problem. What do? You take the tack out of the crosser X, out of the biggest part above the waist. What's the biggest part of Minnie below the waist? 116. Where do we put the tack now? Remember, it's a line next to 116. So you find a line next to 116. What color is that? That's a black line. That'd be a black line, wouldn't it? See what changes? Where the tack goes in the scale. See, what we're trying to tell you is when you have a one-piece dress, a coat, or a jacket, we only give you one cross or X. Why? Because it's all you need. Now, the waist dot was marked to 110, wasn't it? Now, you put this back in the same X because there's only one. Now you make all the dots below the waist according to what number? 116. Next is what? 26. Line the scale up along the line. 26 a megadot. That's marked to number 116. Next is what? 21. Line the scale up along the line. 21 a megadot. What's the last one? 20. Line the scale up along the line. 20 megadot. Now listen, all the dots below the waist are made to what number? 116. You understand how we can take care of a two-size problem, different from top to bottom? Of course, if you don't forget to do what? Change your tack, right? Including the waist up goes to 110. All the dots below the waist are made to 116. Okay, does everybody understand how we've got the dots placed? We're done with the tape and scale, so we'll take it out. Now there's a piece of paper with a bunch of dots. Now what are we going to do? Now we're going to play another game, and it's called Connect the Dots. Remember the coloring books we had? They had numbers to follow, didn't they? We don't need numbers. All you have to do is leave your little guide pin down, copy straight line and curved line as it indicates. Now it's kind of hard to do that freehand. So over in Europe, they used to give the people a French curve to help them out. French curve. How many of you in here honestly don't know what a French curve is? A lot of you have never heard of it. I'll draw it on the board here, so if you don't know what it is, then you will know. This is a French curve right here. Some of you might even have one of these French curves. Some of you have a plastic tool. It's called a fashion ruler. Fashion ruler looks like this. It has a circle on this end here. Ends right here. See, that's a little better than the French curve because it completes the circle here, a little longer down through here, and this is in plastic. Let's draw this a little better here. French curve fashion ruler. Just like when cooking in the kitchen, is there certain tools you need to do things right? Same thing working on a pattern. And it doesn't matter whether you make pattern to your own measurement, whether you're trying to correct the commercial pattern, you should have some kind of tools to work with. These are some of the tools, well, they're helpful. French curve, fashion ruler. Now the tools that we use in these classes are shaped a little bit differently than the tools we've explained. The tool that we use for above the waist is what we call our designer's curve. Now if you notice a little bit of difference, what's the difference? Notice this has two circles on it, doesn't it? Why would it have two circles? One to talk in, one to hear out of. It looks like a phone. How many of you in here knew that the armhole on your patterns are different front and back? How many of you knew that? Of course, if the sleeve caps are different. So you see what a difference is between our designer's curve, that French curve, and that fashion ruler tool? Notice ours has always had the front. See, here's the front. Here's the front, and here's the back armholes on it. There's a lot of difference in the curvature from here to there in the front and back armhole. What it amounts to is all the lines from the waist up. This is the tool we've used to make the lines. We use it to make all the armholes front and back, all the sleeve caps front and back, all the collars, all the necklines. What is it for? It's for pattern making and designing, like we're showing in the first two parts of class. You know what else you can use that for? Correcting commercial pattern. Now the tool that we use for below the waist is shaped altogether differently than that tool. The tool that we use for below the waist is what's called a tailor's curve. Now these tools, they were first made available to sewing public through these classes in 1976 and 1977. This one was originally designed in one piece. It was an inch long in the center. It was all hooked together. It looked just like that. You know what happened to these tools we're taking to stores to see if they carry these for you? You know what they said about this one? Especially this one here. First of all, that thing's too long. We don't allow that much space for sewing item. You know what they said about these? We already have some of the French curves. We already have that fashion curve with the one circle. You'll find numerous different shaped tools or curves that are supposed to be used for patterns. The designer's curve and the tailor's curve, they're kept exclusively in these classes for people that have attended. This one is self-explanatory. This is your hip curve. This is your outside leg on slack skirts, bottoms, and dresses. This is the crotch curve on pants. This is the inside leg. This is the upper inseam. This is for everything below the waist, slack skirts, bottoms, and dresses. We also use this in tailoring when we draw two-piece suit sleeves. Right there is a two-piece suit sleeve. We use it in drawing lapels on jackets. We use it to draw out the men's patterns. We also use it for drawing out the coats and jackets. Why? Because it's long enough. What is it for? It's for pattern making and designing, like we show in the first two parts of class. You know what else you can use this for? Correcting commercial pattern. See these words and numbers that are printed on here? These words and numbers have nothing to do with this pattern making I'm showing the first part of the class. These things could be blank when I make these patterns. Well, then why are the words and numbers on here if it doesn't have anything to do with this pattern making? What the words are for is it tells you where to use the tool on a commercial pattern. The numbers are for reference points when correcting commercial pattern. You understand how you would have to learn how to use the tool when correcting a commercial pattern? We can't teach you how to use these on a commercial pattern. How you think you'd have to learn how to use the tool on a commercial pattern? On your own by actually doing it. Once you learn how, it'll be just like your favorite knife in the kitchen, but it's something you really have to learn on your own by actually doing it. When we make patterns, you'll see what they're for pattern making. Second part of the class, I'm going to use them with pattern designing. Now we're going to play connect the dots. On the front of your pattern, between the 19 and 20, isn't that a straight line? It's straight on a little pattern, isn't it? Some of the lines you need a yardstick on, because this straight edge isn't always long enough. Some of the center, front, or backs. It's long enough for this line, isn't it? How about between the 20 and 21? That's straight. How about across the bottom of the pattern? That's straight across the bottom too, isn't it? How about between the 18 and 26? That's straight between the 2 points. How about the side seam between the 2 points? That's straight too, isn't it? Now these are all straight lines between each one of these points. Now we're coming to the most important parts of pattern. How about that neckline? How about the neckline and armhole? Those are important. Don't you want those to fit and look right? Well, sure. When you're working with the neckline or your armhole, is one time you have to follow one little rule. Always work from the top of your pattern down. Always line up the top 3 dots on the edge of the tool. Always the top 3. Neckline only has 1, 2, 3 dots. Now look, the first dot's on the edge and the last dot's on the edge, but the second dot's still way off there, isn't it? So to make a perfect neckline, just slide this till the top 3 dots line up on the edge of it. See, right there they are. See our designer's tool protected from making a mistake? Because see, it won't go here. Won't go here, won't go here. See how it fits right in? Boom, makes your perfect neckline. You'll see that when we put it on. How about that armhole? That has 4 dots. What's the little rule? Always the top what? Always the top 3 dots. Now I'm working on the front armhole, right? So I'd have to use the front arm half. Back arm half. That must be the front arm half. Always the top 3 dots. See, this is the most important part of the armhole, right through here. 1, 2, 3. What's that part of the pattern left under there? That's called underarm. See where this is underarm from here to there? Guess what that part of the tool's for? That's for the front underarm. That's so you can keep the same continuous curve. Loop the underarm dots together like so. See how this will make you perfect armhole? You'll see that when we put it on. Now, if you're working on the back, of course, you have to use the back underarm, because if you notice, there's a totally different kind of a curve there, isn't there? So you see what the problem is with the French curve and that fashion ruler tool? One of the problems that we found after working with all three, none of the other tools have a proper front nor back armhole to work with, and they aren't long enough for pants. But it's better than trying to do this freehanded with a peanut butter jar or something like that. See, fine sewers aren't born and they aren't made either. First of all, the finest sewers are equipped with all the proper tools and gadgets. Cross shoulder top on one side here, that's straight. How about the opposite side of that? That's straight. But the one for the dart, it has the little point on there. So we'll put the little point on there. It's in material how big or small you make this point. The only reason for that is when you fold your dart and there's no dip in there. So you sew it across, your sewing machine will catch the fabric in that portion of the dart. That's the only reason for that. To do it right, measure the distance from this dot to this one, split that in two, and that's about where the center should be. See the 11 if you'd forgotten all about it? You wouldn't have had any point to line your dart in. What would happen when you fit your pattern on your shoulder? It'd be way too big. See, now what you do is you take a closer look at your pattern, don't leave anything out, put the dart in. There's the dart made. How about the center front? That starts from the second dot in the neckline. How do you draw the center front straight down? Well, from the second dot in the neckline, I have a grid here. I make sure the front line on the pattern's on the same grid line up top here as it is down at the bottom here. Then we draw it straight down. There's a grid in here. I make sure the front line of the pattern's on the same grid line up top here as it is down at the bottom here. Then we draw it straight down. How about the buttons? I'll put them on to make it look good. First one goes across the full part. Sometimes you have square buttons. So I just put those on and make them look good. You want to know how to accurately space your button or properly place your button? Right there. Right there. What does that do? That's for exact placement of buttons. Buttonholes. Shearing, smocking, skirt pleats, drapery pleats, placements for hook size or snaps. You can use it as a knitting gauge. Professional bakers use these things to score to decorate their cakes evenly. You, husband or boyfriend, can use it in the machine shop. What does it do? It's called a Simflex expanding spacer. It accurately spaces lengthwise or widthwise. 72 years that's been used in the garment factory. 72 years that tool's been around. It's for any kind of measuring, not just sewing measuring. Now what's the arrow on the pattern for? What's the arrow for? The arrow's for the straight of material. Center, front, or back is on straight in most cases, less the arrow's slanted. It needs to be cut on the bias. See this straight edge here? See that slot that's cut out of the middle there? Guess what we can use the slot for? That's so you can mark you straight. You can also put your tracing wheel and tracing and things like that. See, this is parallel with this is parallel with this. When you cut the whole pattern out, the center front line's on the straight. Now you see the bottom shaded in portion, or bottom shadowed in portion? That's a fitting dart. That's an optional dart. You don't want to forget it's there if you want it, so we just write there dart. You can wear the waistcoat fitted and see the seam sewn in there, or you can leave that hang loose like a coat. That's an optional dart. The middle of the fitting dart is again parallel to the straight grain if you're going to sew that dart in, and we'll explain how to sew fitting darts in when we fit the pattern onto many. Now you see the broken line on your pattern, the dotted line? Remember that's the waist? If you wanted to draw the waist on your pattern, how are you going to do it? It starts at 18 at the side seam here, but there's no point in the front to connect it. If you eye it, it might come up crooked like that or like that. It's parallel to the bottom. We measure from 26 to 18. See how far that is from here to there? Then we come up from the 21, the same amount. Make a little dot. That's how you draw the waist straight across if you wanted to draw it on there. See how it's parallel bottom here to there and here to there? Now you see those little tiny letter A's at the bottom of the armholes? Those are the sewing instruction. See, the pattern sews together according to the alphabet. A is sewed to A, B is sewed to B, C to C. Everybody knows ABCs. You've got basic sewing instruction. Now, when you have your little design pinned down, you have to punch a hole in the cross to make your pattern. As soon as you take the little design off, there has to be a pinhole on your big pattern. Wherever that pinhole is, you want to mark it somehow. We just solved the short and long waist problem. We just took care of short and long waist. When you have your little design pin down, you have to punch a hole in the cross to make that pattern. As soon as you take the little design off, there has to be a pinhole on your big pattern. Wherever the pinhole is, you mark it somehow, because that's how you lengthen or shorten this pattern. I'll explain that again further in a few minutes. Didn't you punch a hole in the cross on the miniature? What I always like to do after make a pattern, I like to put a piece of clear Scotch tape right over the hole, right over the X. That way the hole on the little tiny design we gave you, it doesn't get any bigger. You understand, if you ruin the little guides we gave you, you're out of business. That way you'd have patterns forever. I can make the same pattern for grandchildren 52 years now, providing the paper's still good, and it will be. Okay, besides that, notice the pattern does not have any seam allowance. It does not have any seam allowance. You have to add the seam allowance. How do you do that? Well, any way you want to do that is up to you. Fastest, easiest, most accurate way to do it is I like to use the rotary cutting tool with the little seam allowance guide on it. Listen carefully. Cut your pattern out along the seam line, which is a solid line. Lay your pattern right on the fabric. You understand your pattern's laid on fabric? Release the safety latch off the blade. How much seam allowance you want? 1/4 of an inch is all that's ever necessary. Pattern company gives you 5/8, and they tell you to cut it off in places anyway. How much you want, a half? Whatever amount of seam allowance you like, that's up to you. Let's say you want a 1/2 inch. Pull the guide arm a 1/2 inch away from your blade and tighten it down. You understand your pattern's laid on fabric. You understand the purpose for the guide arm? So you can follow right along the seam line. There's the seam line, cutting out the fabric right away. You understand we're cutting out fabric? This thing's razor sharp. It'll cut 7 thickness of denim, a little pressure on it. You can use this tool to add seam allowance on any kind of pattern. Even when you get down adjusting commercial pattern, seam allowance is messed up sometimes, isn't it? Or some of you use a type of commercial pattern doesn't come with a seam allowance to begin with. You can use it to cut bias strips. You can use it for any type of crafts or quilting. Forget this guide arm for the time being. You know how much more accurate this tool is than scissors? Whenever you cut with scissors, usually you cut 2 pieces at once. You know what happens to your bottom piece? Your scissors are pushing the bottom piece. It's called push, cut, push, cut, push, cut. You really can't get an accurate cut as you could or should like you can with a tool like this. Once you become familiar with using this tool, you'll use it wherever you can in place of scissors. Now, I didn't want to press too hard because it'll make a hole in my board. There is special cutting mats that must be used with these things. Why must the special cutting mat be used? Well, the real reason is in order to get the cutter to work properly is the real reason. And there's several companies that make the cutting mats. We've been through 7 different ones already since the tool's been out. Problem with a lot of them we tried is a lot of them say they're self-healing and they aren't. A lot of them don't have the proper surface on them in order to get this to cut right. Some surfaces are much too hard or much too soft, and this skips when it cuts. A lot of cutting mats dull the blades right away. And eventually you have to replace all the other cutting mats. Only proper cutting mat we found to use, we've tried every one of them, is the same people that make the cutter. And that's the Olfa cutting mat. Now, there's all different sizes of the Olfa cutting mats. This is the largest one they make at this time without a specialized order. When you lay your fabric down, what the mat does is it keeps the fabric from slipping around. It'll keep silk from slipping around, everything else. It won't cause the blade to dull any, and you would never, ever have to replace the Olfa cutting mat. Now, why we've tried all the other cutting mats over the years, because they aren't giving these things away. Now, you'll find a cutting tool that looks like this, except it has a much bigger blade on it. It's not any sharper, it's just designed to cut more thicknesses of fabric. Notice we don't use the big cutter in the class. Why don't we use the big one? It's too hard to turn the corners when you add seam allowance with the big cutter. Besides being too hard to turn corners when you're adding seam allowance, it doesn't have the little post with a little seam allowance guide. There's also one that's exactly the same size, this size here. Again, you see the problem with it. It doesn't have a little post with a little seam allowance guide. See, this company was very smart. They put these other 2 out first without the guide arm. Then they waited 7 years till everybody bought these ones without the guide arm. Then they built this one with the guide arm in it, so you'd have to get that one too. They used to charge you around $10 for the cutting tool without the guide arm in them. Then they built the guide arm in them, called them new. Charged $12 for the new one. What comes after new? Improved. You know, the only thing that improves is the price. Now look what they do. Instead of building the arm into the cutter, they just took all the old ones and they punched holes in them. They raised the price to $1.11 because, see, it's been improved. It has a hole punched in there. They no longer build the arm as part of the cutter. They just put that in another package and they charge $5 for the guide arm. See, now they get $16 for this improved one, as opposed to only $12 for the new one. You understand, all I did was separate the new one and charge you for both those pieces a la carte. Smart marketing is what that is. You can use this tool in place of scissors anywhere. You can use it to cut leather, vinyl, film, plastic. We use the tool in the pattern class. What do we use it for? We use it to cut out the fabric right away, adding seam allowance. Hottest cutting tool in the country, has been since it came out. I want to caution you about something. Do not try to use the tool without the proper cutting mat, because it just won't work right. And another thing, do not leave the mat in the heat of your car to the direct sunlight, because it will ruin it. 5 minutes in the direct sunlight will warp this mat. And once they're warped, you won't be able to fix them. Okay, does everybody understand how we've gotten this far? You understand you have to add the seam allowance. However you want to do that? Okay, good. Now I'm going to explain why the pattern fits as opposed to standard size pattern without getting too confusing. It's very simple why this works. Size 12 commercial pattern is made to what bust measurement? 34, right? Size 14 commercial pattern is made to what bust measurement? That's made to 36. So if you subtract 34 from 36, how many does that leave? That leaves 2, doesn't it? What does that 2 mean? Well, let's tell you what it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean that the size 14 pattern is 2 inches bigger all the way around than the 12. It doesn't mean that at all, although a lot of people think it does. What it does mean is the difference between the 12 and 14 is 2 inches. That means there's 2 inches there that there are no patterns being made for. Or there's 2 inches there that there are no patterns being graded for. Did you know the difference between a half-size pattern? That's even a greater distance. There's 2.5 inches difference between the half-size pattern. Doesn't mean the next one's 2.5 inches bigger all the way around. That means that there's 2.5 inches there that there are no patterns being made for. How many eighths are in 1 inch? Yeah, even all the new math, there's still 8 of them. How many eighths would be in 2 inches? Okay, does everybody agree there's 16 eighths within 2 inches? Everybody agree upon that? Okay, good. Now look up here. The holes in the scale, they're 1/8 of an inch apart from one hole to the next. So see, what I'm telling you is between 2 inches of the scale, how many patterns can I make within a 2-inch range? I can make 16 different patterns within this 2-inch range. You can't get a more accurate pattern than what we're showing you here today. Patterns can't come any closer than that. Your pattern's in there somewhere, you just have to find it. The bottom line is you could be 6 or 8 holes off in this scale, off your correct measurement, and this pattern will still fit. You can do something wrong and you have to come up with better results. You understand I have 16 patterns within a 2-inch range. Why don't they make the commercial patterns like that? It's very simple. Why? It's the bottom line. What's the bottom line? Well, they wouldn't make as much money if they made that many patterns. Besides that, they really don't have to make them like that. Why don't they have to make them like that? Because they know you're going to buy them anyway. Why do you buy them anyway? Because there isn't anything else. So you understand why you'd have to get better results even if you did something wrong. Okay, come on up here, Minnie. We're going to put it on and see what it looks like. Now remember we said the shoulder seam will be a little bigger. Okay, you can stand right about there. Remember we said the shoulder seam will be a little bigger, the armhole will drop way down into there. Did I measure the width of the shoulder neckline armhole? No, it isn't necessary. If it was, we'd have to stand here and show you how to do all that. Just look straight ahead. That's good. Okay. Oh, that's perfect. Okay, put your 2 fingers right there. Press tight. Does the neckline fit nice? It doesn't gap up and go anywhere. Did I measure the neckline? No, it's not necessary. How about that dart? That's pointing right at the full part like it's supposed to. Did I measure from here to there? No. I mean, I grant you, if your bus is down here, I don't know how it's gotten down there. That's an extreme problem, isn't it? Well, let's just say it is. All you do is you'd mark your full part. You draw that in a little longer or shorter if you have to. It'd be pretty close to where it's supposed to be, unless you have extreme high or low bus. More important than that, turn aside. How about the width of the shoulder? See how it's a little bigger like I said it would be? It fits exactly how I told you it would, doesn't it? And now put your arm up. See how nice the armhole fits down through there, but see how it drops way down into there? Now it looks good on her because she has a bulky sleeve on. Does the pattern fit or doesn't it? Guess what? Slacks will fit just as nice. I'd say the waist good, inch too long. Other than length, the waist pattern fits like exactly how I explained it would. Okay, thank you, Minnie. You can have a seat. Now listen carefully. It's no mistake that the pattern fit like that. It's mathematically done. Remember math class when in school? It was only 2 answers. What were those 2 answers? Mine and the teacher's. That's always happened to me anyway. In 1969, they sent that man to the moon. How'd they figure out how to do that? Mathematical formulas. Now they figure all it out? You think the mathematician can figure out how to make patterns that fit halfway decent? We've just shown you. It's no big thing. You know how long they've been using this made-to-measure dress pattern method? This method's been used in Europe and the Orient for over 200 years. Hong Kong tailors have been making patterns custom fit to measurements like this since they've been in business. See, by measuring around you, it doesn't matter who you are, unless you're born with deformity or had some kind of operation, and we can solve the individual figure type problem most of the time by grading the pattern to a different measurement scale in that particular area. Lady come to class one day, what about me? My arm on this side is much bigger on the other side because I had operation. I still have to cut and adjust on this pattern, don't I? No, I told her, no, you don't. All you have to do is make two sides. When she makes her armhole and sleeve cap on this side, she just makes it to a bigger number in the scale than the rest of the pattern. So even if you do have a figure type problem, it can be solved most of the time by grading the pattern to a different measurement scale in that particular area, so don't worry about that. By measuring around you, we can mathematically project the width of the shoulder, neckline, armhole to fit like a waist jacket's supposed to. How can we mathematically do that? Haven't we explained all that already? It's very simple why it works. We grade the pattern to within 1/8 of an inch of the proportion of the human body in each area. Now, we don't know how tall or how short you are by taking the measurement around. Some of you might have a short and long waist, and length is up to you in any case. You would adjust the length on the pattern to suit your individual taste or to keep up with the current trend. You make your pattern as long or short as you want to for style, or as long or short as you have to. You know, like to make a sleeve longer or shorter, to make the slack or skirt longer or shorter, or to solve short and long waist. Now, in the first pattern we tried on, we found out the waist was 1 inch too long for Minnie, didn't we? Notice I wrote that down? Because every pattern she makes from now on, the waist would be 1 inch too long for her. So do you see what this number would still save you from doing? It still saves you from having to fit yourself over and over and over and over as you now have to do. Each time you buy a new pattern, you usually have to fit that particular one and see where it doesn't fit. Why do they all fit differently? There's several reasons why. What we're telling you is you only have to put this on once, just like we did. Make sure your waistline's exactly right and see if you need to lengthen or shorten your pattern in any of the other areas. You need to check length on the pattern. You only need to do it once. So in the long run, when you go to make the other patterns we gave you, if you don't have to spend the time to fit them on each time, like you now have to do when you want to make a garment, think that leaves more time for actual sewing the garment together? I think it would. A lot of people that come to these classes, I don't have time to sew. Whether you realize that a lot of your time for a lot of you isn't spent sewing. A lot of time for a lot of people is spent trying to get the pattern to fit. Putting them on, take them off, make adjustment. Putting them on, take them off, make adjustment. Cutting, adjusting, slashing, spreading, taping, fitting them back on. And what happens when you get all through doing all that? It still fits like sock on a rooster sometimes, doesn't it? Or it doesn't fit as well as some of you like it to for all the time. You know what's more important than your time? It's the aggravation that some people are spending. Sewing is supposed to be fun. Stop and think about when you had fun last time you were sewing. Stop and think about it. How can it be fun when you get all done with a thing and it doesn't fit right? If it fits, it's worth $8 million. If it doesn't fit, it's not worth a quarter. How do you take care of the short and long waist on this pattern? Where? We solved that a long time ago, didn't we? Remember earlier when we had the little design pinned down? You have to punch a hole in the cross to make your pattern. As soon as you take that little design off, there has to be a pinhole on your big pattern. Remember we told you to mark the pinhole somehow? Before you lay the pattern on the fabric, very simply cut the pattern in half across the pinhole. Very simply cut the pattern in half across the pinhole. Spread it apart to lower the waist or lengthen the pattern. Overlap it to shorten the waist or shorten the pattern. Doesn't that drop the natural waist right place or lengthen and shorten your pattern? Now when you lay the pattern on the fabric, you don't forget to remember to somehow you have to remember to add the what? Seam lines, however you want to do that. We use the rotary cutter and guide arm and cut the fabric out right away. What we're telling you is all the lengthening or shortening you need to do is done from the middle of the X. Now there is no X on your big pattern. But when you have this little design pinned down, you have to punch a hole in the cross to make your pattern. As soon as you take that little design off, has to be a pinhole on your big pattern. Wherever that pinhole is, you mark it somehow. Because that's how you lengthen or shorten all the patterns. You know, like to make a sleeve longer or shorter, to make the slack or skirt longer or shorter, or to solve short and long waist. Now to make the pattern longer or shorter for style, you do it different. You made a bunch of dots on a blank sheet of paper. You can make your pattern as long as you want to by moving the dots down further, then lining them in, or you can make them as wide or as narrow as you want to. You want a wider or narrow lapel, you move the dots in or out. How about that fitting dart? I didn't say anything about that. If you want to wear the waistcoat fitted, if you want to see the seam sewn in here, the main thing is when you crease this waist dart, you crease it directly in line with the shoulder dart parallel to the grain if you're going to sew that dart in. How do you sew in a fitting dart? From nothing to nothing. You taper it. You pull the bulk of it out at the waist. You mark that much off with the chalk and sew it in. You can wear this as tight as you want here. The idea is if your pattern fits as nice as these will fit, you can pull this up as tight as you want here. We showed you, you can still move around, it will still look good up through here. What if you sew a 2-inch fitting dart in the first pattern, you like how it fits? What do you do to all these patterns that have that fitting dart? You sew a 2-inch fitting dart. You understand why it will fit the same as the first one? The reason is we use the same formulas to make each one of these little designs. We've used the same formula for decades. So when you have something that's this fantastic, that works all over the world, see, this system works all over the world. Of course, you never change it. How about a facing? Most of the time we supplied you with a facing. The abbreviation ST, like on the jacket you have with the slack pattern in your hand, that's a facing. If the pattern doesn't have a facing, you just very simply cut your facing right from your same pattern. See, all a facing is an extension of the outline of your pattern. If you don't want to ruin your pattern by cutting it up, if you don't want to ruin the pattern by cutting it up, see, patterns are not that sacred when you can make your own from the miniature, and it doesn't take 5 minutes to make another one of these once you've practiced. If you don't want to ruin your pattern, you can draw the facing off your pattern. Lay this on a blank sheet of paper. Trace this outline. How much facing you want? 2, 4 inches. Shove it over. Trace it again. Cut that away. Push it. It's your perfectly matched facing. What's another way you can cut your facing? Is with that thing. What thing? Yeah, with your cutter and guide arm. You can cut a facing right on the fabric if you want to. How about a lining? Because you probably want to line this. How do you make your lining? The lining is made from your same pattern. And the lining is the same size except for in the back. You need at least a 2-inch accordion pleat in the back so you can move. Suppose you make a pattern that comes up too big or too small. Now what do you do? Well, don't try to remeasure. Easiest thing we can tell you to do is if you make a pattern to 110 and it's too big, just move your tack down a few holes. You understand a smaller number, make a smaller pattern? Too small at 110, move your tack up a few holes. You understand a bigger number, make a bigger pattern? Happens when you gain weight, where's the tack go? What happens when you lose weight, where's it go? Oh, we have them better than that. How about little children or grandchildren? How many of you sew for them? A lot of you do. As they're getting bigger, what happens to your pocketbooks? They get smaller, because as they get bigger, you keep having to buy what? More patterns, more money for more patterns. You don't realize the money you're spending or the money you're going to continue to spend. You know why you don't realize it? Now you have to do it a little at a time. $8 here, $5 there, $6.50 there, $7 there. See, they're smart. You don't miss any money when you do it like that. What changed with this when little children change? You don't have to get $5 or $6 off another pattern. What changed with this when they change is where the tack goes in the scale. I guarantee you this is the easiest and fastest way that you'll ever see on how to get a pattern to fit halfway decent without having to go to a specialized pattern making school, spend your time to go to pattern making school, and tens of thousands of dollars that pattern making courses cost. We're done with the first part of the class of pattern making, so you can put these leaflets away. Okay, the second part of the class has to do with pattern designing. Now, the whole key of this designing is if you have a pattern that fits nice, you can do this. If you make it to your own measurement, it has to fit, providing that you didn't do something drastically wrong. And we told you what to do even if you did. What we say you need to do with your tack, you need to move your tack up or down in the scale if your pattern's too big or too small. Another thing is there is no such thing as a new style. You've heard if you keep your clothes long enough, they'll come back in style. You know how true that is? Clothing manufacturers, pattern maker, tailors, designers, there's only certain basic patterns that are used to create any known style. Every garment you'll ever wear or ever will wear consists of the same basic pattern. See, in the garment industry, we have a collection of master patterns that's used to create any known style. In garment factory, there's 2 bodice. What kind of bodice are there? If you look around, most bodice are set in sleeve. Bodice either have sleeves in them or they don't. 2 bodice, sleeved and sleeveless. There's only 2 basic dress patterns. What kind of dresses are there? There's dresses with waistline and dresses without waistline, sheath and shift. 2 bodice, sleeves and no sleeves. 2 dresses, waist and no waist. There's only 7 sleeves. Really, there's only 2 sleeves. One that's set into the armhole like this one, and one that's apart and attached to the bodice like the raglan, dolman, kimono sleeves. Starting to get the idea? There's 9 skirts, 32 necklines, and 36 basic collars. That's all. That's not very many patterns. That's not very many patterns, is it? Actually, it's even less than that. That whole collection is made from 5 pattern pieces. See, we only have 5 pattern pieces we make everything from. How in the world are all the styles and designs created as you like to look at in a store and a magazine? What's done with the 2 bodice, 2 dress, 7 sleeve, 9 skirt, 32 necklines, 36 collars? Well, yeah, they're all just mixed and matched around. If you mix and match the 2 bodice, 2 dress, 7 sleeve, 9 skirt, 32 necklines, 36 collars, how many combinations you think you can come up with? 438,917. That's without doing any designing we're going to show you. All it's done is the pieces are mixed around. We also use different darts. We have 3 basic darts. We have a shoulder dart, like is in the waistcoat. We have a side dart, which is a more popular dart you see more often, side dart. We have a dart from below the waist, which is a French dart. We use different seam, different yoke effects. All a yoke is a seam. Selection of fabric, there's all different kinds of cloth. You know what most of the designing is? Most of the designing is just a different cloth and color. Different accessories like buttons and lace, raise and lower your hemlines, widen or narrow things like lapels on jackets, flare and narrow things like your pants. Then the cost is raised in, and then it's called a new style. Now, if you had the system I've shown you in your possession, the system contains every basic pattern in miniature form like we use in the garment industry, so you can make the custom fit pattern for your own measurements, just like I've done this waistcoat. You would be able to duplicate any garment you've ever seen, any style, any fashion, of course using these basic shapes of patterns, following a few rules of designing we'll have to show you. First rule of dress designing we use is what we call redesigning a bust dart. Let's say that Minnie doesn't like the shoulder dart. Maybe she likes a dart from the neckline. That's a neckline dart. From the armholes, an English dart, just like below the waist, French dart. Side dart's a more popular dart you see more often. Side dart. This is how to redesign a bust dart. Lay your pattern flat, drawing your new design anywhere from the waist, anywhere from the side, anywhere from the armhole, anywhere from neckline. Long as you're drawing it back to the dart you don't want. Somebody asked, well, how did you know to start it right here? How come you didn't start it here or there? You can start anywhere from the neckline, anywhere from the armhole, anywhere from the side, anywhere from below the waist, long as you draw it back to the dart you don't want. Now, you don't want shoulder dart anymore, do you? So what do? Well, you tape it shut. Now, when you tape the shoulder dart shut, what's going to happen to the pattern? Well, when you tape the shoulder dart shut, there's going to be a big bubble in your pattern. You see what the big bubble's for? Now you see what a dart's for. All a dart's for is what's called a shaping tool. Just like tucks, pleats, and gathers, it puts shape to your pattern of your garment. Then you take your scissors and cut right along that line you drew in there. Doesn't matter where you drew the line, wherever looks best on you. Now what kind of dart do you have? You sure don't have a shoulder dart anymore, do you? You have a what? You have a side dart. See how it just went from here to there? See how it just went from here to there? Cut the cloth as the pattern lays, you mark your new dart. When you bring it back together, it goes back exact way it came, parks it. Now the dart comes in from where? It comes in from the side. Does everybody understand how to redesign the bust dart? That's easy enough. Now we're going to tell you the best way to sew darts. A lot of sewing books tell you to sew from the side to the point. You know what happens when you sew from the side to the point? Feed dog on your sewing machine. Does everyone know what a feed dog is? That's a little teeth of rollers that moves the cloth through. Feed dog pushes all the goods out at the end and it shapes the dart at the point. When it's tied off, the big bubble shows up there. You know what that big bubble says? I made that. That's what it says. You understand why that happened? It's because of the easing effect of the feed dog, which we're going to explain in the last 40 minutes of the class. The best way to sew your dart would be to set your needle short of the point. Set your needle short of the point. Back stitch one time, then sew towards the side. That way your dart will lock stitch a point, at least get a nice sharp point. Set your needle short of the point. Back stitch one time, then sew towards the side. That way your dart will lock stitch a point, at least get a nice sharp point. Now we're going to tell you the best way to where the dart belongs. There's 3 basic darts. We have a shoulder dart, which will reach the fullest part of the bust like it did on Mimi. We have a shoulder dart, which reaches the fullest part of the bust like it did on Minnie. We have a side dart, which reaches the fullest part of the bust. We also have a French dart. Remember, the French dart either starts at the waist or below the waist. That reaches the fullest part of your bust also. You can draw this in straight if you want to. I like to draw it in curved. See, the whole purpose for the dart is to create a cup in your pattern for your bust to go into. I've seen some sewing books tell you to stop your dart 2 inches from the fullest part of your bust. You know what happens if you stop that dart 2 inches from your bust? Now you have two problems. You're over here and the cup's over here. Whoever thinks of those things, I have no idea. The dart belongs to the fullest part of your bust, not 2 inches away. If you get it anywhere near the fullest part, it's in the right place. Another rule of dress designing we use is what we call superimpose one pattern over the other. You know what superimpose means to do? Take something, lay it on top of the other. You know what a raglan sleeve is? One of these, a raglan sleeve. We can put a raglan sleeve on a set-in sleeve bodice. That sounds impossible, it's not. Pin the raglan sleeve down, make a few measurements, set it aside. See, we have a miniature design in that system, so you can make the raglan sleeve from it. Make yourself a set-in sleeve bodice, set it aside. Just take your raglan sleeve and lay it on top of the set-in sleeve bodice. See how the sleeve is laid on top of the bodice? This is what we call superimpose one pattern over the other. Then you take your scissors and cut right along the line of the raglan sleeve. What did you just cut off? Top half of the set-in sleeve bodice. See, now you have a sleeve and you have a bodice. What do you have to remember to do right there on material? Spread apart for seam allowance, sew it back together. See how we have a raglan sleeve and a set-in sleeve bodice? Superimpose one pattern over the other. Another rule of dress designing we use is what we call a line drawing. This is how we make a different seam in your pattern, your garment. Let's say you see something at the store, had a curved seam in it like this you want to duplicate. You've seen this style dress before many, many times. What kind of style dress is that? That's an empire waistline. You know how we make the empire waistline? We take this plain Jane dress pattern, we draw the line in just like so. Doesn't matter where you drew the line, wherever it looks best on you. Then we cut the pattern half across this line. Now you have a pattern piece here, you have one here. What do you have to do here and there? Seam allowance, right? Of course, the top half is on the fold. That's how we make an empire waistline. Suppose you see something at the store, had a curved seam in it like this you want to duplicate. You've seen that before. That's just the opposite of that. That would be a scalloped effect. All you do is draw the line in, cut your pattern in half, spread for seam allowance, you have a scalloped effect. You know what a yoke is? All a yoke is a seam. Yokes either go across the bust, right there's a V-shaped yoke. Or they don't go across the bust, right here's the shape of yoke. There's a lot more rules to pattern designing other than just these few that we've shown you. There's a lot more rules to this pattern designing. How many of you like to know all the rules? A few of you would? Yeah, but we don't really have the time during the class to cover all the rules. We covered some of the main ones. For those of you that want to know all that, because some people do, we don't have time to cover all during the class. One of our instructors has been a professional costume designer for nearly 50 years. She has 10 years of pattern making, designing, costuming school experience. She said she spent nearly $20,000 to go to different schooling, learn all this stuff about these patterns. She took the time to put together some leaflets called Be Your Own Designer, for those who want to know all that, because some people do and we don't really have time to cover it all during the class. Design Leaflet 1 starts off telling you what your figure type is. Remember we talked about that earlier. There's 3 figure types. After you identify your figure type, then she'll tell you what hairdo looks best on your figure type. Then she'll go on telling you what styles of patterns are best with your figure type. What lines look best on you. What colors are best with your figure type. How to camouflage problem areas if you need to do that. She'll even tell you what kind of shoes you need to wear. How to redesign a bust dart. We already showed you that. See, some of these things we've already covered. Remember we were telling in the garment industry there's a collection of patterns to create any known style. 2 bodice, 2 dress, 7 sleeve, 9 skirt, 32 necklines, 36 collars. Then we told you it was actually less than that. That whole collection is made from these 5 pattern pieces. See, we only have 5 pattern pieces we make everything from. How to create optical illusions. Short and heavy, might want to look a little taller and thinner. Rules for dart location. We talked a little bit about the dart. This explains what to do with that fitting dart down there. Remember that fitting dart? Explains that a little better. Drop shoulder with gathers, shoulder gather partial yoke. Converting darts to seams. We didn't show you that, but it tells you how to take this side dart and this fitting dart and convert all that fullness that's here and there into a seam so the seam functions as the dart. How to make a princess line out of a basic bodice. Shorter, heavier people look better with a princess line design. Parallel darts. This technique is interesting. This is a technique we use called draping. As you can see, all draping is cutting the pattern pieces and spreading them equally to add extra fullness to any particular area. You can drape inside the fitting dart, it adds extra fabric. Drape on the outside side seam, add fullness. Drape in the neckline. Draping covers a wide range of pattern designing. Here's a straight skirt, there's a semi A-line. How do you make an A-line skirt? You can't draw it all on one side. It'd be too much against a straight grain. You'd be walking around, all your fabric would be hanging on one side. We make semi-A-line first. Then we cut the pattern in the middle and spread it open equally, which is again called draping. This is how we make an A-line skirt. Gore skirt, circular skirt, folded in taper pleated skirt. Here's the draping technique again with a collar. See how it adds all that extra fabric for your collar? There's all different shape yokes you can make. We showed you how to make yokes. Here's how to identify all the sleeves when you see them. Raglan, dolman, kimono sleeves, starting to get the idea. Superimpose one pattern over the other. We showed you that. Kimono sleeve, flat collar. Remember there's 36 collars? Every one of them are drawn off the neckline of your pattern. Every one of them. Rolled collar. Here's the draping technique again with a rolled collar. Mandarin collar, convertible collar, shirt collar. How to get the crotch centered on a commercial pattern. I have no idea how that page got on. That has nothing to do with this designing, but it's a good thing she put it in there. That's all pants is a crotch. You want to make sure you look through this page 57 in the blue design book when I pass around so you can see how to get the crotch centered. That's the most important correction you can make on your commercial slack pattern. More ideas for pants, easy way to put a band on. How to take all the measurements on a commercial pattern. You don't have to do all this designing unless you want to. You understand what this is all about? This has nothing to do with that pattern making. What's this all about? This is how to take an existing pattern that's already here, whether it be a pattern you custom made to fit your own measurement, or a commercial pattern, and do all these things to it. You know how successful the design book was? It was out for 2 years. People that had it kept writing to the office. You have more information about that designing. A couple of years later, she completed 2 more. Design leaflet 2 is how to draft the sloper for a bodice. What's a sloper? A sloper is a basic pattern. That's easy enough. Drafting a front bodice pattern. Now this is pattern making from scratch right here. I call it the long way. It takes a solid 2 hours to draft the basic bodice from scratch the long way like she shows you here. You can make a basic bodice out of the system using the miniature in 2 minutes. Why does it only take 2 minutes when you use the miniature and 2 hours to do it the long way from scratch? Well, that's all pre-computed. All the math work's already done for you in the miniature. Pattern making from scratch, you have to do all the measuring and the figuring. It can be done like this. It just takes a lot longer to make a pattern from scratch the long way like she's talking about in these first couple of pages. After you have a sloper for your bodice, then she'll tell you how you take a draping test for a piece of fabric. Flexibility tests, flat-fitting collar, sailor collar, collars that have the separate stands, how to make a boat neck, a cowl neck. She'll even explain how to grade a commercial pattern up or down into different sizes. How to make a bra pattern. You want to make your own bras and lingerie? All you need is that basic bodice pattern right there and you'd be able to do it. How to make a half slip, a chemise pattern. This talks about drafting the basic sleeve, how to make shoulder pads, jacket pads, coat pads, how to make capes. There's even costuming in this one. How to make glittering costumes with glue and paint. How to make a crown, a hood. She'll even show you how to make your own Wonder Woman boots if you want to wear something like that. Folding wings, butterfly wings. Some people want to know all this. So Design Leaflet 2 is pattern making from scratch for a basic bodice. What's more important in there than the pattern making from scratch is it's all the designing procedures that you need to know for a basic bodice. Design Leaflet 3 is how to draft a sloper for a skirt. Remember, a sloper is a basic pattern. It takes about an hour to draft the straight skirt from scratch the long way like she shows you here. You can make a straight skirt from the miniature in 45 seconds. You understand why? That's all pre-computed. You understand this is the long way to pattern making. After you have a sloper for your skirt, she'll illustrate and show you and tell you how to draw every style of skirt. You understand they all come from the one. Guess what we can make from a skirt pattern? That's how we can make a slack pattern. It can come right off the skirt. Slacks developed from a skirt sloper. It takes about an hour to draft the slack pattern from scratch the long way like she shows you here. After you have a sloper for your slacks, she'll illustrate and show you and tell you how to draw every style of slack. You understand, again, they all come from the one. So Design Leaflet 3 is pattern making from scratch for skirts and slacks. What's more important in there than the pattern making from scratch? Again, it's all the designing procedures that you need to know for a straight skirt and a basic slack. I had somebody ask me one day, does this designing information, these 3 design books, is this going to work on the commercial patterns I already have at home? Does the designing procedures work on a commercial pattern? Yes, they work on anybody's pattern. Make sure you look at page 57 in the blue design book when I pass around so you can see how to get to crotch centered. That's the most important correction you can make on your commercial slack pattern. We don't do all this designing till later. First thing we do to create the styles and designs is we mix all the basic patterns around before we start doing all that. What number does Minnie use to make her collar? Fits above the waist, so she uses, what was that number? 110. What number does she use to make the neckline? It's made to 110. You think the collar is going to match the neckline? Has to. It's made the same measurement. What number is she used to make her sleeve? 110. What number is she used to make the armhole? That's made to 110. You think the sleeve is going to match the armhole? Has to. It's made with the same measurement. So you see how these pattern pieces are all made to be interchanged because they're made with the same measurements? You know what's even really better than that? They're custom made to fit your own measurement. You know what custom made patterns will cost you? You know what one custom made basic dress pattern costs? They start at $150. That's just for the basic dress pattern. Yet everybody can do it themselves. I had a lady one day, she says, I don't have enough imagination to be my own designer and create these styles and designs. In fact, I don't even have enough imagination to mix all the basic patterns around like you're trying to tell me to come up with my own styles and designs. Well, you don't need imagination. First thing you need is the collection of master patterns we have taught you about. You need a pen, you need a little notepad. Even if you don't think you have enough imagination and mix all the basic patterns around like we're trying to tell you, you know where you go to get the ideas? Where do you go to get the ideas? You go to the store and look around. Don't a lot of you do that already? Oh, the smart people always carry a little see-through vellum paper along with them. When you go to the pattern store and you start leafing through their pattern books, when you lay your see-through vellum on top, sketch the pattern pieces that you would need. You sketch their model. You sketch the pattern pieces that you would need. Why don't you take a little bit from them? I had somebody jump out of the seat one day. She says, what'd you say? Take a little bit from them? She says, yeah, they've been cleaning me for years. Yeah, she says, I just realized. I says, you just realized what? She says, well, I think they've been selling me those same 5 pattern pieces over and over and over and over and over, haven't they? Yes, they have. You understand, every time you buy a commercial pattern, you bought the same 5 patterns I've showed you in that blue book that's going around for you to look at. You understand you can do this with a fashion magazine? You can lay it on top and sketch the model. Or what's even more fun than that is to go to the store and look around. How many shoppers we have here? It's fun to go shopping, isn't it? What's the first thing you look at when you get over there? The price tag, right? Here it is, $182.50. Hey, Martha, come here and look at this thing. Is that $18.50 or is that printed wrong? Isn't that what happens when you go shopping for clothes and they aren't going down any, are they? Are they going down around this part of the country? I don't think so. You understand why you go to the store. Isn't that outfit already designed for you? It's all put together for you, isn't it? What we're telling is there is no new styles. What's in style is what you like and what looks good on you. That's what's in style. To be your own designer is really very simple because all you're really doing is copying what's already there. When you find the outfit you like, all you have to do is look at it as pieces and make a sketch of it. Let's see, what kind of collar does that have? How many collars is in the collection? Remember, there's only 36? Has to be one of those. That's all there is. Make a sketch of it. What kind of bodice is it? That's easy. There's only 2, sleeve to sleeveless. What kind of sleeve is it? Is it set into the armhole like this one? Or is it part attached to the bodice like the raglan, dolman, kimono sleeves? Starting to get the idea? What kind of skirt's that? There's only 9. After you have a sketch of the basic shapes of the patterns you need, then you'd come to the system, you try to find them. That's something I can't help you with. You have to go through 15,984 miniature designs to find a miniature pattern and make a raglan sleeve. Yeah, that's the way you'd have to do it. Easiest way that we found that people do is they start right from the first page. You can make these models as you see them, although there's no styles and designs intended in mind at all. You know what these models display? The basic shapes of every pattern. This is model 1. You might like the whole thing. That's up to you. The idea to use the system properly is, oh yeah, that's the sleeve I saw on the outfit I want to make. So you go on the back. There's all the miniature designs on the back of the page, loose leaf. Watch this. You pin the whole page down, your pattern making board first. Then you roll the industrial strength pattern paper on top you can see through. Then you put the tack on the scale according to the line next to 110. Then put it in a cross and make that sleeve. See, if you do it like we did earlier, you have all the basic patterns for the two models on this one page. If you put this pattern page on top of the paper, like we did earlier, you know what's going to happen when you go to make some of the smaller patterns? The page will interfere with making the dots. What we used to do to make that sleeve before we figured out it goes under the paper, we used to fold the pattern page in half this way. Folded it back this way, then we pinned the sleeve down and made it. You put the pattern page down first, then you roll the industrial strength pattern paper on top you can see through. Then you put the tack on the scale according to the line next to whatever pattern piece you're going to be making. Then you put it in that cross and make that pattern piece, you follow? That way the page doesn't interfere with making the dots. Then you put a piece of tape over the cross or X. You put it back in the library of patterns. Now you have the sleeve you needed. Children or grandchildren, they'll have the sleeve they need. Then you go to the next page. So you have to look at the model as pieces. What kind of collar is that? Kind of sleeve, kind of bodice, kind of skirt? Oh yeah, that looks like the bodice I need. Yeah, that's it right there. So you go on the back and just make the bodice part. You understand now you have your sleeve and bodice? You understand how you're supposed to interchange the pieces, which is the whole idea, make them right like you see them. Now you have to find a collar. Round neck, boat neck, scoop neck, jewel neck, V-neck. Oh, we're looking for a collar, not a neckline. Nah, that's not the collar I need. That's not even close. That's not it either. I don't even have a collar, neither is that. Oh, wait a minute. There's the collar I need right there. So you go on the back and just make the collar. You understand again how you're supposed to interchange the pieces, which is the whole idea, make them right like you see them. How about slacks? Good pair of slacks are what, 8 or 10 bucks? It costs anywhere from $50 to $175 for a good pair of wool slacks. Blue jeans are $50 each. What would they be worth if they're custom fit? Hong Kong tailors charge $130 per pair. This will make slacks fit just nice, that waistcoat. See, there's some men's pattern, there's children's pattern, there's evening wear, sports wear, maternity wear, western wear, lingerie. You name it, there's every basic shape pattern you ever need. You just have to find it. Once you know where it's at, though, you'd always know. Like a lot of people, they have their system like this. A-line skirts on model 10, Gore skirts on model 27, sailor collars on model 52. If you happen to know the names of the pattern pieces, some people locate them that way. Two people looked at this model here one day, and I heard them talking about it. Yeah, this one right here. One lady says, oh, I like this outfit here, especially that princess line design. Lady next to her says, nah, I don't like that green. What do you mean you don't like green? That might be pretty in a pink, orange, red, or polka dot. See, the next page, the models are plain black and white. I wish our designers would make these all black and white so people wouldn't do that. Now, they look a lot prettier in color, sure. Now, a lot of people get excited, take a system home, jump in the back, take one of the patterns out. Lady asked one day, she says, wait a minute, when I make pattern to my measurement, how do I know how much material to buy? How are you going to know how much material to buy? I'll put it this way. When you buy material like we tell you right here, how to economize. What does economize mean? Save money. You'll save yourself enough money within a year's time at the longest to have paid for this system we've just taught you about. Even when working with a commercial pattern, you should be getting your material like that. Any of you ever make any garments, have any fabric left? Any of you have any leftover fabric at home? Some of you have enough fabric to open up your own fabric store, call it leftovers fabric. Some of you have to hide it when you come from the fabric store so people don't see you're buying any more. You want to get material like we're going to tell you. It only takes a few seconds, you'll save a bundle of money. First, you make your pattern to your measurement like we've shown you. Get your commercial pattern wherever you want to do it. And what you have to do is determine the width of the material you're going to buy. What does it come in? 36, 44, 45, 54, 60, whatever it may be. Create yourself a field half the width of the cloth. If you buy a 45-inch width material, how wide's this field? It's 22.5 inches wide, wouldn't it be? You understand why half? Because the fabric's double. Then you take your patterns and lay them in the field. These are all pattern pieces, these things. You see what we're doing? We're laying our patterns out. You lay them all in a straight, move them around, add your own allowance. That'll fit right there. Then all you have to do is measure the length of this area that your patterns are laid in. This way you buy exactly what you need. If you don't know what width you're going to buy before you go there, create yourself fields half the various widths of the cloth apart. Some people have masking tape taped on the floor according to half the width of all the cloth. Some have that Pellon cut out to half the width of all the cloth. Some use old bed sheets. Some use the pattern making boards. I've actually seen some people take their patterns right down in the store with them and lay them along the fabric. You understand how to get material? Lay your patterns out in half the width and measure the length. Only takes a few seconds to do that each time. You'll save a bundle of money. Now you understand the biggest advantage that comes the first two parts of class? Biggest advantage that comes the first two parts of class is now you can get the whole collection of master patterns at one time. In that system we have taught you about, it takes approximately 300 models, which are 300 sets of patterns, to display all these master patterns we've taught you about. You can mail for the system anytime you want, weeks, 6 months, 6 years from now. There's an invoice which has the office name and address on it. Now what we're going to do now is this. I'm going to go through the price sheet with you so you know what things cost. Now obviously we can't pass things out, but there'll be an 800 number on the video which you can order from. Now the first thing that's listed on there is the pattern making toolkit. You'll get the complete collection of Master Sloper patterns with the 300 master sets of patterns, and you're going to get the toolkit for pattern making. And the most important thing in the toolkit is the what? Is the tape with the scale. Rest of that's just Scotch tape, push pins, and a pencil. You understand the most important thing in there is the tape with the scale. Okay, now you see the column in there where it says class price? Those of you that have the video or have attended the class or have the video at home are entitled to the class price or the in-home video price. If you want to order the system today, the in-home video price would be $94. The $94 includes the system and the toolkit. Now the next thing that's listed on there is the children's supplement. There's a few children's patterns in the system. Every 2 years, our designers, we make new patterns for children. Class price for children's supplement will be $25. For 100 patterns, every couple of years they make a new children's supplement. Next thing that's listed there is the fuller figure supplement. Now there's a few fuller figure models in the system. That's something new that we had put together where there's 90 models and patterns where the styles are more suitable to fuller figure individual. Class price for full figure is $25. Next thing that's listed there is the men's supplement. Again, there's a few men's in the system. Every 2 years, our designers, we make new men's patterns. Class price for men's are $25. Next thing says current supplement. Now pay strong attention to this. I already explained the current supplements before I started the first two parts of this class. Remember we said 4 times every year in the spring, summer, fall, and winter, we have our designers making new ideas from the basic patterns for you. For 40 patterns, we charge what, $16 for 40 patterns? Now they make 4 years, spring, summer, fall, and winter. 16 times 4 is $64. See, people that have the pattern system on a special registration form, once in a while you get a letter in the mail. The smart person, instead of paying $16 for one winter supplement, smart person gets the subscription, because instead of 64, if they get them one at a time, they're only 53. You understand they saved $11 for the same thing? The current supplement is the subscription to spring, summer, fall, and winter. There's a few children's fuller figure men's in each one of these current fashion supplements. Okay, you understand from number 1 through 5 on the invoice, that all has to do with the international pattern system I've taught you in the first part of the class. This children's fuller figure men's and the special editions, and the subscription to spring, summer, fall, and winter, that's 1 through 5. Okay, you want to block that off on the invoice so you don't confuse that with the rest of the tools listed on there. Now the next 2 tools we've already taught you about are the Designer's and Tailor's Curve. Now what did I use these for in the first part of the class? I used these for pattern making with the system is what you saw me use them for. Then I used them up here with this pattern designing. See these words and numbers printed on here? These words and numbers have nothing to do with the pattern making I showed you in the first part of the class. These things could be blank when I make these patterns. Well, what are the words and numbers for? Those are the reference points when correcting a commercial pattern. Lady asked one day, well, what if I don't have a system? Why can't I just get the tools to work on my commercial pattern? You should have the tools regardless of whose pattern you work with. Mail form later, they're $36 for the set. Class price for the tools would be $24. That includes all 3 pieces. $24 includes the Tailor's Curve, which is the 2-piece one, and the Designer's Curve. Okay, the next thing listed on there is the bond fit pattern for slacks, or I call that the adjustable pants pattern. That's the last thing I'll cover in the class is the adjustable pants pattern. Right now, the class price for that would be $35, and that's the last thing I'll show you at the class is the bond fit pattern for slacks or the adjustable slack pattern. Next thing listed on there is a microserger. A lot of you have serging machines at home. What do they cost? A couple $100? Some of them are $1,000, $1,200 anymore, aren't they? A lot of you would like to have a serging machine. What would be the next best thing to a specialized serging machine? Next best thing would be some kind of an attachment. About 5 years ago, that's exactly what the sewing machine engineers have done. They devised this attachment for sewing machine. It's referred to as a microserger. What it is and what it does is it's a heavy-duty cutting attachment that you replace your pressure foot with. What this thing will do is basically what a serger does. This trims the material, allowing your zigzag household sewing machine at least has to zigzag, to simulate factory-style overcasting, overlocking edges on your garment, giving you a professional sewn finish. Certain machine, it does French seam. It comes complete with a little 21-page instruction booklet on how to hook it on, how to use it. Notice there's 3 different sizes: long, short, and Singer slant. The long shank is an inch long, the short shank is a ½ inch long, and the only machines that take slant are Singer. You can mail for that at the class price or call up on the 800 number for $45 is the class price for the microserger. If you have a serging machine, you don't need it. You understand it's the next best thing till you get a serger. A lot of people start with a cutting attachment, then they save their money for serger. That's the microserger. Next thing that's listed is the vellum paper. There's 20 yards of paper. The class price for the paper is $12 for the 20 yards of paper. You can't ever have enough vellum paper. Vellum paper is $12. Oh, on the catalog we're going to give you, it shows 2 sizes of paper. We're going to give you a catalog. You have a catalog in your hands. It does show 2 sizes of paper. It shows 8-yard paper, and it shows there is no 8-yard paper anymore. 8-yard paper has been discontinued. Next thing that's listed there is the tape and scale. Now, in your system, you have the plastic tape and scale. It's wrapped up inside the yellow box there, so you don't need the tape and scale that's listed on there. You've got it inside the pattern making system. If you want to mail for the toolkit separately, it's $20 for the toolkit for the tape and scale. The tape and scale that's listed there is this. There's a cardboard scale fixed on the centimeter tape measure. If you don't, you have a paper one on your leaflets we gave you. You know, so you can make the few patterns you have, so you can make the slack pattern that you have. If you don't want to reinforce your tape, your scale and put it on your own tape measure, the $5 tape and scale is cardboard. It's a cardboard scale that's already fastened on the centimeter side of the tape. Some people insist on having one fixed together. Other than that, you can fix your own off your leaflet, or you can get the cardboard one. Again, the one that comes with the system is $20. That's the toolkit with the plastic tape and scale. This is cardboard. Otherwise, you can fix your own to make a few patterns you have. Next thing that's listed is the rotary cutter and guide. Now, a lot of you have the large Olfa mat, but if you want just the cutter and guide, it's class price $15 instead of $16. Now, a lot of you have a cutter and mat, but you don't have a guide arm. If you just want the guide arm to put on your cutter, it would be $5. But you might have to drill a hole in your cutter, because remember we showed you the old ones, they don't have holes in them. Guide arm would be $5. Next thing that's listed there is the design books. Now, I've explained the design books already. Design book 1 is the main one. It has more basic information than the other 2. Class price for design books are $12 for the one. If you're only going to get one, this is the one you'd want to get first, is the blue one, because it has more basic information than the other 2. Now, design book 2 and 3, we've already explained all that. That was the pattern making from scratch for the bodices, skirts, and slacks. What else is in there? It's all the designing procedures for bodices, skirts, and slacks. That's $18.50 also. Class price for all 3 would be $30. Most people get all 3 design books if they can. Again, if you're only going to get one, you want to have the blue one before the other 2, because it has more basic information than the other 2. You should have all 3 design books. Why do you think you should have all 3? Well, if you had all 3, you would have all the designing information, because the design books are really wrote in conjunction with each other, or they're really wrote as a set. Next thing after design books, it says roller foot. Now, as far as I'm concerned, this is one of the more important tools we can tell you about at the class, is this roller foot. Isn't there certain kinds of materials you have problems with when you sew? Isn't there certain kinds of materials you have problems with? You have problem with real light, sheer, slippery things, or knits. You have problem with nap fabrics like vinyl and ultra suede. What do a lot of you do if you have a problem with fabric? You lower your feed dog, you pull it, use wax paper, tissue paper, talcum powder, foot powder, toilet paper. Forget the wax paper, tissue paper, talcum powder. That's what he devised this roller foot. Listen carefully. Hear that? You could probably feel it. There's a special design on the roller. What the rollers do, how does it help on a light shear slippery fabric? It feeds the cloth through straight. It keeps it from slipping around. That's how it'll help you on a light shear slippery fabric. How does it help in the other direction? Plastic, vinyl, leather, canvas, burlap, ultra suede. Your regular pressure foot's flat. This has rollers on it. You understand what the rollers do? Helps feed the cloth through a lot smoother because of the rollers. When they first devised the roller foot, it was 36 years ago. Remember what came out 36 years ago? Remember back when the interlock fabrics first came out, or you call them double knits? Same thing. Your sewing machine would not feed the cloth through. It wouldn't sew it right. That's when they devised this roller foot. It was originally designed just to sew with the double knit fabrics, and as more of the synthetic fabrics came out and people started using it, they found other uses for it. It'll sew over pins and metal stays. It'll zigzag. A lot of people use these to sew lace on. Some use them for top stitching, putting pockets on. Anytime you have several layers of fabric you want to sew. Oh, fake fur? Regular pressure foot's open in the front. Fake fur will catch in there. Well, so you can sew fake fur and fabrics to catch because it's closed in front. Zippers. You know what a zipper foot is? Half a pressure foot. Don't use a zipper foot to sew the zipper in. A lot of people use a roller foot. See, you understand why they use a roller foot? It helps feed the zipper in a lot smoother. I get people every day. I don't use my roller foot for nothing except sewing in zippers. A lot of people just use it to sew zippers in and nothing else. Very simply this. Roller foot will replace 20 years worth of sewing experience. This thing is invaluable with a problem material. In fact, a lot of people, I have several different sewing machines. On some of the old ones, I took the regular foot off, the flat thing, and I've set it aside. I put this on, it's been on ever since. A lot of people just leave it on the machine all the time, use it like regular foot. I'm going to put it bluntly, you don't do anything else about any of the other tools that you're seeing today. If you have a sewing machine at home, you should have roller foot to put on it. There's places that'll help you we haven't even begun to mention. Now, if you notice, there's 3 different sizes. There's a long shank, which is 1 inch long. The shank's 1 inch long, which very few machines take. There is about 9% of machines take that. 10% of machines take a long shank. The shank is 1 inch long. There's a short shank, which most of the machines take, which is a 1/2 inch long. And then there's a Singer slant needle. Your needle's not really slanted. It's the foot that's at an angle. It's the foot that's at an angle is all it is. Only Singers are slant needle. Male formulator, the class price for the roller foot would be $6. All you have to do is tell them what kind of machine you have or the length of your shank or whether it's a slant needle. Roller foot is invaluable with the problem material. Next thing that's listed there is a walking foot. Now I'm going to skip the walking foot right now because I'm going to cover the walking foot in the last part of the class when we cover the sewing techniques. The walking foot will fit in with a new technique on how to sew, sleeves, collars, shoulders, side seams. I'll come back and cover the walking foot when I cover the sewing part of the class. While we're pricing it, the class price for walking foot is $18. Next thing that's listed there is the scissors. Biggest mail order our company has, besides more and more and more paper, are these scissors. Once you use these, you'll never use another brand of scissor. You'll be writing in for all the other scissors they have on the catalog. Male formulator. They're $23.45 for right hand. Class price for scissor is $18. Oh, they don't charge any more for the left hands, although they should because they cost more. Next thing's listed is pinking shears. A lot of you still use a pinking shear. A lot of people complain that pinking shears, a lot of people have complained they wasted their money. All they do is chew the fabric. Well, a lot of pinking shears are useless. These pinking shears these people make for $26, they'll cut as well as the $50 pair of gingers. In fact, they cut completely to the last tooth. Guess what I always asked about when we didn't care? Every class, you have any pinking shears? Doesn't matter if these were $126. More important, the price of $26 is they work. You'll be able to use them. Okay, now the next thing that's listed there is the So Much Better, which is a sewing book. That's another question we used to get at the class all the time. What's a good sewing book? I'm new at sewing. Do you have a good sewing book? The best sewing book out right now is the Sew News sewing book. This has been recently published by the people who put that same magazine in all the fabric shops and sewing centers, the Sew News magazine. What I like about their sewing book is the same information. It's in a lot of 400- or 500-page sewing books that cost $40 to $50. Same information here, a little over 250 pages. And it's not $50. The sewing book is only $20. This sewing book is excellent. It covers everything. Next thing it's listed is the Simflex Expanding Gauge. What is that? That's that button spacer we showed you earlier. Remember the button spacer we showed you earlier? And it's listed on the invoice number 26 as the Simflex Expanding Gauge. I call it a button spacer, which is the same thing. The class price for the button spacer would be $12. Next thing that's listed there is the class video. Again, we used to sell those at the class for $15. class videos for attending the seminar. Those of you who are at the class videos are free. Next thing is the video cassette for slacks. We used to sell those for $29.95. Class price for those are free. If you want a mail for the 2 videos, anybody that doesn't have the 2 videos, both videos you can get for $29.95 for the set of videos plus the postage. Next thing that's listed there is the large mat only. Now, a lot of people have a small mat and they want a large one. If you just want the large mat only, without the cutter and guide, the large mat only is $35. The large mat only is $35. Next thing that's listed is the large mat cutter and guide. Now, if you don't have a cutter and guide, you have to have one. The large mat cutter and guide, the class price for all 3 pieces, class price for all 3 is $42. You understand? You get the large mat, the cutter, and the guide arm for $42. Next thing that's listed there is the advanced guide. Now, what the advanced guide is the ladies that have the rights to do the system in Canada, they have custom dressmaking shops where people come in and they custom design them clothing from the system. What these sewing, when the weather's nice, the sewing teachers teach the system throughout their provinces. What they did over the last couple of years, they put together the advanced guide to the pattern system. What it does, it very simply answers questions that people have had about things in the system. It answers questions like stretch fabrics, linings, facings. There's some detailed sewing instructions, shoulder pads. There's some more designing. The advanced guide was wrote to help answer questions that people have had about things in the system. The class price for the advanced guide is $6. Okay, now I've covered everything on there except for the adjustable pants pattern or the bond fit slack pattern and the walking foot, which I'm going to fit in with the last part of the class. Okay, now we're going to cover the 3rd part of the class, and you can get your notepads out. Remember earlier in the class we talked about darts. We mentioned a feed dog on your sewing machine. We talked about darts. Everybody sitting here has the little teeth of rollers on their sewing machine called feed dog. Now, everybody knows that the feed dog feeds the material through. But did you know that while it's feeding the material through, it's also shortening, gathering, it's what's called easing the bottom piece of cloth faster than the top. It's intentionally designed to do that. Why is it intentionally designed to do that? Very simple why. Your fabric's straight, your body's curved. You want the feed dog to ease certain seams so it shapes the cloth to the contours and curves of your body. So if the feed dog on your sewing machines are intentionally designed, what's intentional mean? On purpose, to be shortening or easing the bottom piece of cloth. What piece of fabric do you put on the bottom when you're sewing? You put the longest piece of fabric on the bottom so the feed dogs can ease and shape your garment together to proper direction. Or do you want to put the short piece on the bottom so the feed dog gathers up, makes it shorter? Then you have to try to take the big one and jam it into the short one. This is why some people have trouble with sewing, because they're not keeping the longest piece on the bottom. You keep the long piece on the bottom in all cases and all places. If you remember that saying, you won't have any problem. Some of you are thinking, yeah, but what if they're the same size? Isn't that what a couple of you are thinking? What we're going to do in the next few minutes is we're going to explain what seams in your garment are supposed to have a little extra ease built into them. We'll tell you how much ease really belongs in those areas. That way you know which ones to put on the bottom so your feed dogs can ease and shape your garment together in the proper direction. Now, the first thing you want to remember is there's 7 places that must be eased by the feed dogs in order to shape the cloth. And the 7 places are this. Number 1, back side seams. Back side seams of anything must be eased by your feed dog. Take, for instance, if you have a dress pattern, you have to make sure your back side seams of your commercial pattern are 1/2 inch longer than the front side seams. Where do they have to be longer? It shows you right on the pamphlets you have. 2 places, 1/4 inch on the upper adjusting line, 1/4 inch on the lower adjusting line. Again, the commercial pattern manufacturers, they print that upper and lower adjusting line on the back of your dress pattern, don't they? 1/4 inch in the bodice waist, 1/4 inch in the skirt waist. Now your back dress is 1/2 inch longer. You just fixed it, so it was. Now when you sew the dress, where do you keep both back side seams when you sew them? On the bottom next to the what? On the bottom next to the feed dog. Now when you sew the dress, it doesn't matter how you sew the garment. All we're going to get across is what you don't do. The instructions on ready-made pattern for sewing garments, they give you arrows and they call that directional sewing. They say you have to sew at the arrows, so you're sewing with the grain of the cloth. Isn't that what everybody's been led to believe by the pattern manufacturer? How many of you knew the direction in which a garment's sewn doesn't have anything to do with the grain of the cloth? A few of you knew that? Now, I know you've all been taught and told that, and it's not so. In fact, knit fabrics don't have a grain as such. They're put together like a chain-link fence. Now, the way you put your pattern on your fabric, of course, has to do with it, but the direction in which a garment's sewn doesn't have anything to do with the grain of the cloth. Yet all the home sewers have been led to believe that by the pattern manufacturer. So you see why people get in trouble? In order to follow the arrows that are printed on those patterns, everybody's always okay on one side of their garment. They're always okay on one side, because they keep the back on the bottom, which is correct when sewing side seams, shoulders, and pant legs. As the feed dog eases the back side seam by easing the back, it'll pull the front of the fabric in a garment to the correct shape. But see where the mistake comes in. They flip the dress over so the bulk of the fabric is on the outside of the machine. You understand what happens when it's flipped over? Front winds up on the bottom on this side. As the feed dog eases the front by shortening the front, it'll pull the back of the cloth around to this direction. Now you see what's happening to the garment? It's being made a lopsided or a cockeyed or a twisted direction. Guess what's going to happen at the hem? The hem will never come up straight. We don't suggest you sew up one side, flip your dress over like most people do, and sew up the other, because your garment will be made lopsided and cockeyed. There's no way the hem can come up straight. You're supposed to keep both back side seams on the bottom when you do sew them. Now, how do you do that? It doesn't matter. If you want to sew from the bottom up, fine. One side will be the easy side. But in order to keep the back and the bottom and follow the arrows, you would need to shove all the bulk of the fabric on the machine into one side in order to sew from the bottom up. You can do it that way if you want to. There's nothing wrong with that. You understand why you don't flip it over? You understand you have to keep both back side seams and both back shoulders on the bottom when you do sew them. That's easy enough, isn't it? Okay, the next thing must be eased by the feed dog, number 2. Are the back shoulders. Back shoulders must be eased by the feed dog. You have to make sure your back shoulder pattern is 1/8 inch longer than the front shoulder pattern. If it's not, you adjust it so it is. Now, if one shoulder is 1/8 longer, usually everybody has 2. That'd be a total of 1/4. Now, when you sew the shoulder, you have to match the fabric to start with. When you sew the shoulder, you can sew them straight across from shoulder point to shoulder point. Straight across. That way, the feed dog can ease it equally and properly all the way across. You understand how to sew shoulders? Keep both back side seams, both back shoulders on the bottom when you sew them. Now, the next thing must be eased by the feed dog, number 3. Number 3 are the back pant legs. Back pant legs must be eased by the feed dog. You have to make sure your back slack pattern is 1/2 inch longer than the front slack pattern. Where does it have to be longer? It shows you on your pamphlets there. 2 places. 1/4 inch longer in the upper adjusting line, 1/4 inch longer in the lower adjusting line. Again, the commercial pattern manufacturer, they print that upper and lower adjusting line on the back of your slack pattern. 1/4 inch longer in the back crotch, 1/4 inch longer on the lower adjusting line. Now your back slack is 1/2 inch longer. You just fixed it so it was. Now when you sew the pants, you have to keep the back on the bottom. How do you do that? It doesn't matter. The easiest way to do it would be to sew down one side and up one side by turning the slacks around. You understand why the back pant legs must be eased? Same reason why the back sides of a dress must be eased. It'll pull the front pant leg to the correct shape. Very simple. You understand how to sew side seams, shoulders, and pant legs. Keep the back on the bottom. That's easy enough, isn't it? Okay, the next thing must be eased by the feed dog. Number 4 and number 5 are the 2 most important things you'll ever hear about in sewing. Number 4 and number 5. Next thing must be eased by the feed dog are the sleeve caps. Sleeve caps must be eased by the feed dog. Not the armhole like the pattern manufacturer's telling you. Sleeve cap must be eased by the feed dog. And the correct fullness for sleeve cap is 1/4 inch more than the armhole. That's all it's supposed to be in there, unless it's a gathered sleeve. You know how to put gathers in your sleeves. Those are easy. Those are when you put the gathers in your sleeve before you put the sleeve in. So unless it's a gathered sleeve, you want to try it like this. The results will be self-evident. What you have to do is measure the armhole on a commercial pattern. How with a string is the easiest way. Take a string, lay it along the sewing lines of the armhole. This is only a half an armhole. If you had a back of the pattern and you join it at the shoulder, isn't this your complete armhole laid flat? This is the back half. This is the front half. Measure the armhole with a string. Let's say the armhole string measures 14 inches long, for example. Then you want to take a string, lay it along the sewing lines of the sleeve cap. Let's say the sleeve cap string is 15 inches long. Well, the sleeve cap is 1 inch longer than the armhole. Has to be 1/4 inch longer. That's the correct fullness for a sleeve cap. So how much too big is this particular sleeve? 3/4 inch too big. So the sleeve cap doesn't match the armhole when you got the pattern. So you have to make an adjustment or a correction. If it's a long sleeve, shorten your pattern to about this length. It's easier to make this correction if you shorten your pattern. From the center of your sleeve cap, you make yourself a slash. You start in the center, you take out 1/4 inch and you tape it. That's 1/4, isn't it? Yeah, we have 3/4 to get rid of in this particular case, so diagonally on the other side, make another cut. Take out another 1/4, that's 2/4. Yeah, but we have 3/4 to get rid of in this particular case, so diagonally on the other side, make another cut. Take out another 1/4, that's 3/4. See, whatever you have to get rid of, make sure you take it out of the middle, front, and back of the sleeve cap equally, because the front and back of the sleeve cap is a totally different shape. Isn't this the front armhole? See how we draw the front of the sleeve cap? We're still on the front armhole. You flip this over, we just drew the front of the sleeve cap with the front armhole. Isn't this the back half of the armhole? See how we draw the back of the sleeve cap? You flip it around, we're still on the back armhole. See, the front and back of the sleeve cap, is a totally different shape. Now your stitch line of the sleeve cap, this line was 1 inch longer. It's only supposed to be 1/4 inch longer. So we made an adjustment or a correction, and we taught you how to take out the extra 1, 2, 3/4 that don't belong. How much longer is the stitch line of the sleeve cap now? It's 1/4 longer and happens to match the armhole. Now that you have a sleeve cap that matches the armhole properly like it's supposed to, the sewing instructions are different than the instructions they write for a commercial pattern. See, the proper way now is to sew the shoulder seam in first. Remember what we talked about when sewing shoulder? Keep the back on the bottom. After you sew the shoulder seam in first, then you want to lay the sleeve cap flat. You understand what that means? Everything's open. Now you can sew the sleeve cap in before the sides, then sew up to here. Next statement is what we're really trying to tell you. See if you don't catch this. You ready? With the sleeve cap on the bottom next to the feed dog, which is intentionally designed to shorten and ease the bottom piece of cloth, not the armhole like the pattern manufacturer's telling you. What if you have a 2-piece suit sleeve where it doesn't connect under here? The sides are sewn up, the sleeve's all sewn up. The sleeve is in a tube like this. How in the world do you get the sleeve cap next to the feed dog if it's in a tube like this? That's why there's free arm sewing machines. You understand that's one of the things the free arm is for, is to sew in a 2-piece suit sleeve? You understand why the sleeve cap has to be eased by the feed dog and not the armhole? If you haven't caught on, I'll show you why. The reason the sleeve cap must be eased is as the feed dog eases the sleeve cap, it pulls the circle in the armhole around to the correct shape it's supposed to be pulled in. Very simple. It pulls the armhole around to the correct shape. If you just look at it, it's common sense. Sleeve cap must be eased, pull the armhole around to the correct shape. What comes after sewing in sleeves? Number 5 is sewing on collars. I guarantee you when we buy a ready-made collar, when we buy a ready-made pattern, the collar does not match the neckline properly for sewing. They're going to give you a collar 1.5 inches to as much as 4 inches longer than that neckline. Now, how do you get that thing on there if it's 4 inches longer? You've been getting it on there. I have no idea how you do that, but you've been getting it on there. Did you know the collar is only supposed to total 1/4 inch longer than a neckline? If it had been engineered properly to match for sewing. And the only place you can fix the length of the commercial pattern collar, once it's graded out, and of course the commercial pattern's already graded out, only place you can fix the length of that collar now is at the center back seam here. That's the only place you can fix the length of the commercial pattern collar. So the first step is to correct the mismatch between the collar and neckline. And because of the mass production of a ready-made pattern, there's two mismatches that develop in the pattern in that area, and I'll show you what those mismatches are. First, you have to lay the neckline flat. How do you lay the neckline flat? Didn't we show you a second ago when we laid the armhole flat? Join the shoulder, or the front and back bodice pattern. Remember, this straight line is the shoulder. This is the armhole. This is the front of the pattern. This is the back. Here's the shoulder. It's half the armhole. That's half the neckline. If you had a back of a pattern, you join it at the shoulder. This is your complete armhole and neckline laid flat. Now what you want to do is take your collar pattern and lay it on top. Match the collar seam as close as possible to neckline seam. And when you lay the collar pattern on top, make sure the center back of the collar right here extends 1/8 inch past center back of the neckline. So whatever extra collar you have past this 1/8 of an inch here, you cut that off. You understand this is only a half a pattern. If half the collar is 1/8 longer, when you lay it on the fold, how much longer is the whole collar? It's 1/4 of an inch longer, isn't it? You understand why the collar of a pattern is supposed to be 1/4 inch longer than the neckline of a pattern? Haven't we explained all that before we started this part of the class? There's a certain amount of ease that has to be in certain seams. All we're doing is telling you what seam, exactly how much belong there. Where's the only place you can fix the length of your collar? The only place you can fix the length of the collar is right here at the center back seam. And we just fixed it. We've cut this off. Now, the other mismatch on the ready-made pattern is in this area. See the dotted line? What part of the commercial pattern is that? That's the neckline. Again, after the fabric's all been cut out, the sewing instructions have been written to go along with the way they had mass-produced these pattern pieces. So you have to ease that fabric that's in the neckline into the collar. They say, well, you've got to ease that in to get your collar rollover. Isn't that what everybody's been led to believe? Look what's going to happen when this extra fabric in the neckline is eased into the collar. Guess where the wrinkles come out? They'll come out in two places. The other side of the collar or the underside of the neckline. See, it has to come out somewhere. We don't suggest you ease that fabric in there because it doesn't belong in there. What you want to do is remake the neckline to match the collar by cutting through both together. All that means is to take your scissors and cut right along the inside collar line, just like so. One lady says, well, if you cut the neckline off of there, won't that make your neckline bigger? It's not going to make it that much bigger, but even if it did, when the fabric's eased in, the neckline gets bigger the same way as if I cut that off on the pattern, besides the wrinkles coming out on the other side. It won't make it that much bigger, so don't worry. Now look, your stitch lines match perfectly now, don't they? You have a collar that's 1/4 longer. So with collar on bottom instead of on top, you have to match the collar to start with. If it's 1/4 inch longer, the feed dogs on your sewing machine all these years have been intentionally designed to take the 1/4 of an inch longer collar. It eases onto the neckline. Besides that, it pulls the neckline around in the correct shape it's supposed to be pulled in. Very simple. Did you know the pattern manufacturer has you with the neckline next to the feed dog? Guess what happens to your garment if the neckline's on the feed dog? What's feed dog do to the neckline? Same thing it does with the armhole. Feed dog comes along and it gathers up the neckline. It dish-shapes the circle and makes it smaller. That's not the worst of it. You know what the worst part about that is? It pulls the whole garment to the backward shape in that area. Lady asked one day, well, if my garment's being shaped backwards if the neckline's on the feed dog, why do they instruct me to sew it like that? Why are the sewing instructions written the way they're written? Haven't we been pointing out why? The sewing instructions have been written to go along with the way they mass-produce that ready-made pattern. If you want to sew properly like we're teaching at the class, if you want to sew properly like we're teaching at the class, if you notice you have to fix the commercial pattern pieces so they match properly before you go to material. Once the material's cut out with the way they give you that pattern in that package, you can't sew like we're talking about. You can't do any of this. You would have to follow those instructions. Now, we're not done yet. That collar never roll over like that. See, there's a collar and an under collar. Sometimes there's all three. Inner facing. You want to cut your under collar, collar facing, from your corrected collar pattern. Isn't this our corrected collar pattern? You notice we're telling you to make your own facing. That way you know it's done right. And when you make your facing, you start from nothing at the corner here To make your facing, you trim 1/8 of an inch off the inside collar line, just like so. Now look, the under collar isn't as wide as the collar. It's 1/8 of an inch narrower. Well, that's perfect. You don't want that under collar as wide. What's that for? That's for a couple things. That's so it don't show up in the seam, you don't have any lumps and bumps, and that's how we get it to professionally roll over properly. What if you have an inner facing? What's it the same size as? It's the same size as the under collar, because if it was the same size as the collar, you'd have all that bulk in there. It'd show up in the seam, you'd be walking around like this, it wouldn't roll over properly. Now when you sew the collar to the facing, you sew it together with the collar on top of the collar facing. You understand why the facing must be eased? Have you ever seen people walk around with their collars twisted, rolled, curled, turned, the fabric shaped in this direction? Have you ever seen that? You understand why the collar's curled or shaped this way? 2 reasons why. One is it was sewn backwards. Feed dog had shaped the cloth in the wrong direction. The other reason why is the under collar was probably the same width. You understand why the facing, the underside has to be eased. As the facing's eased, it pulls the fabric to this direction rather than this way. So what's number 6 going to say up here? It isn't hard to figure that out. 6 is going to say what? 6 will say facings. How do you know how much longer to make your facings? I'll put a question mark by that. Depends on the length you're facing. Listen to this. Every 9 inches of cloth, you have to have an 1/8 of an inch extra ease. 18 inches of cloth, you need a 1/4 inch extra ease. 27 inches of cloth, you need 3/8. 36 inches of cloth, you need a 1/2. 72 inches of cloth, you have to have 1 inch. See, it depends on the length you're facing. Last thing must be eased by your feed dog, number 7, are hems. Hems must be eased by the feed dog. Now, in order for the hem to be eased, you need to fold your hem so the dress side's up. The dress side is obviously the outside, so the feed dog can ease the hem. Problem with doing it like that is it might be kind of hard to see to sew it. Some people mark the outside with soap or tailor's chalk, so they have a chalk line to follow when they sew it. See, in the garment factory, there's a special machine which is used to sew a hem. And I'm sure you don't want to buy a special machine just to sew your hem. If you don't want to fold so the dress side's up and mark with chalk, if you don't have a special machine, there's another way you can ease your hem. If you want to put it in by hand, work it in, take it up as you go along, you're still easing your hem even if you did it that way. You understand why the hem should be eased? It's the underside of the cloth. As the hem's eased, it pulls the cloth around to the correct shape it's supposed to be pulled in. Very simple. 7 places must be eased by your feed dogs in order to shape the cloth. Back side seams, back shoulders, back pant legs, sleeve caps, collars, facings, and hems. Now there's other places to sew on that garment other than those 7. Isn't there other places to sew? There's other places to sew other than those 7. The rest of the places on your garment wind up being what we call in the garment industry matched seams. That means the rest of the places will wind up exactly the same length or exactly the same size. So suppose you sew those together without pinning them, what's going to happen? One will come up hanging longer than the other one. Now do you see why in home sewing they've taught you to pin or base things? They say pin it here, it'll match at this end, won't it? Pin it here, it'll match at this end too. See why they're telling you to pin? To get it to match at both ends. Put all the pins in the middle. Guess what happens in between the pins? You still have the easing effect that's intentionally produced by the feed dog on your sewing machine. So in between the pins, there'll be puckers and waves, and it's going to look tacky, and this is what you refer to as homemade. So what do you do about that? How do you sew all the match seams without pinning them? Lady one day says, I'll just lower my feed dog when I sew the match seams. Won't that take care of it? No, if you lower your feed dog, it won't feed the cloth through. Lady one day says, I'll pull that bottom piece so hard the feed dog can't shorten it. I wish we were the sewing center working on her machine. Every couple of months she'd be bringing that back to the shop to get it adjusted again. Now you don't go pulling against the feed dog because you're ruining your sewing machine. So how do you sew all the match seams without pinning them? Well, again, in the garment factory we have a special machine which we use to sew nothing but match seams of a garment. And I'm sure you don't want to buy another machine now just so you can sew the match seams. So what we suggest you do at home would be the next best thing. Remember, we asked you earlier how many of you had serging machines. A lot of you have a serging machine. Remember, the next best thing to the serging machine was this microserger attachment. You understand that's the next best thing to the specialized machine? It's not going to do what a $1,000 overlock or serger will do, but it's not $1,000 either. It basically does the same thing. It cuts the fabric and it finishes the edge. You understand that microserger is the next best thing to the special serging machine or the overlock machine. So what would be the next best thing to sew match seams on your garment? Next best thing would be some some kind of an attachment. What we suggest you do at home is we suggest you change your foot. We suggest you sew all the match seams on a garment. What are the match seams? Everything but what? Match seams are everything but those 7 with what's called a walking foot. Instead of your regular pressure foot. What's a walking foot? Right here it is. It runs like your buttonholer. This goes in your needle bar. Your needle bar runs the thing. What this thing does is as the feed dog shortens the bottom, this will shorten the top along with it. So if it shortens the top along with it, it makes the fabric come up even without pins or basting. So if it makes the fabric come up even without pins or basting, it could be called an even feed, couldn't it? So where would you use the walking foot or even feed if it makes the fabric come up even without pins or basting? Very simply, where? Every place but where? Every place but those 7. You use this on all the match seams that don't need shaped. Those must be shaped. What are the match seams of a garment? Center back is a match seam. It doesn't need shaped. You have to use the walking foot without pins or basting. Center front's a match seam. It doesn't need shaped. You have to use the walking foot without pins or basting. The underarm sleeve seam is a matched seam. Guess what darts are? You don't see darts listed up there. Darts are matched seams. They don't need shaped. Crotch seam and slacks is matched. Putting pockets on, top stitching. Oh, what about making drapes? One lady says, every time I make drapes, mine will come up hanging along at the bottom. I can never figure this out. I bet you know why now, don't you? Drapes don't need shaped. How about machine quilting? This is an absolute must with machine quilting. If nothing else, you use it to match plaids and stripes if you sew how you've been sewing. So what's the walking foot for? 2 words. Most sewing. Anytime you have 2 identical length pieces of fabric that don't need shaped, those must be shaped. And you want it to come up even without pins or basting so it doesn't look puckery and tacky in homemades where you need to use a walking foot, which is most sewing. Pillowcases, bedspreads, mending, drapes, and machine quilting. So you have to have this thing. Now if you notice there's 3 sizes of those, just like the microserger, just like the roller foot. Long, short, and singer slant. Class price for the walking foot is $18. So you have to have a walking foot. Now, I'm going to explain the difference between the walking foot and roller foot. I'm going to put it bluntly. 2 things in the class you have to have at home regardless of whose pattern you work with. And I think you know what those 2 things are already. You have to have a roller foot and you have to have a walking foot. Because these are tools that you need regardless of whose pattern you work with or these 2 feet. Now let me explain the difference between the 2 feet. The walking foot, the roller foot is for the problem materials, case closed. What's a roller foot for? Problem materials. If you have a problem fabric, put your roller foot on and sew all the 7 places that need to be eased and shaped by the feed dog. Then you take your roller foot off. You put your walking foot on, then sew all the match seams that don't need shaped. That way you don't have to keep taking this on and off. Lady asked one day, well, what if I have a problem fabric and I have to sew a match seam? Now what am I going to do? Can't use them both at the same time, can I? No, you can't use them both at the same time. What if you have a problem fabric and you have to sew a match seam? Well, if you have to sew a match seam, you better use the walking foot so it comes up even. And if it's a problem fabric, it doesn't matter because the walking foot helps it anyway. You understand the roller foot's to sew all the seams that need to be eased and shaped by the feed dog? See, the feed dog can still shape the cloth with the roller foot on. And the only purpose for walking foot is to sew only the match seams that don't need shaped. Now do you understand the difference between the 2? Okay. Now, zippers. Where's the zipper? Here it is. Now first of all, when you sew your zipper, don't use a zipper foot to sew the zipper in. A lot of people use a roller foot. The reason I use a roller foot because it helps feed a zipper a lot smoother. I get people every day. I don't use my roller foot for nothing except sewing in zippers. If you have trouble, try your roller foot. It'll feed it in a lot smoother. Now when you sew your zipper, don't sew up one side and down the other. What's feed dog will do to the zipper? It'll shift it one way on one side and one way on the other. If you have trouble sewing zippers, try to sew both sides in the same direction. Whether it's up or down doesn't matter. See, the problem with zippers, they move when you try to sew them. So instead of pinning or basting zipper, is a lot of people tape them. Now they have stuff you get called seam tape. If you use the seam tape, just be careful you don't sew through it. You won't have any problem. There's people use masking tape. There's a lot just use this regular Scotch tape. Instead of pinning or basting zippers, they tape it down. It's best to tape it right down the middle of the zipper, right down the middle. Then you'll have a guide to follow, and you can sew along each side of the tape. Some people tape it crosswise. Then they sew up to the tape, and then they pull it off. There's also the double-face basting tape. It's thin and sticky on both sides. That'll hold it in there for a while, but after you wash your garment, it'll start to come out. You've got to sew it anyway. A lot of people tape their zipper. You understand why they tape it? Number one, it's faster. That's not the main reason. Main reason is it'll keep it from shifting or moving. Anytime you can tape something instead of pin or baste, much faster, keep it held in place better. If you don't want to tape it down, there's another way you can try it. This will work on a metal or nylon zipper. Works on either one. First, you buy your zipper extra longer than you need it. Yeah, you buy it longer than you need it. After you get your pattern adjusted, your fabric cut out, when you get your zipper home, rip the stop off the bottom zipper. Tear it off, pull it off, cut it off. Don't cut the tab, the fabric, or lap off now, just the stop. Then you separate the zipper. You take the slide completely off. Now you have two separate pieces to your zipper. With your seam open, you sew each side in separately. You sew this side in, you sew this side in. Now how in the world do you put the slide back on there? Same way you took it off from the bottom. All you have to do is feed each opening of the zipper through each opening of the slide. How can you judge the zipper's even before you go zipping it up? Well, it doesn't really have to be even. Why? Why doesn't it have to be even? Because the whole thing's going to be longer than you need it. If you want to make sure it's even, fine. Just look at the two tabs. It looks like it's even. You hold it and zip it right up. 19 out of 20 times it'll come up perfect at the top, and if it doesn't, it doesn't matter, because the whole thing's longer than you need it. How do you finish it off the bottom? You don't need to put a stop on it. What do? You bar tack it across the bottom. So you can sew it in separate, put the slide on. You just saw me do it. I'll do it again. This is not as difficult as it looks. A lot of garment factories, it's still being done like this. People that reupholster furniture, a lot of times zippers are sewn in separately, slides are put on. People that alter clothing, if you have a zipper that's broken, if you have a few teeth missing near the top or bottom. Now if they're missing out of the middle, there's nothing you can do about it. Separate the zipper, take the slide off. Wherever the teeth are missing, you bar tack it across there. When you get all done, your zipper is going to be all lumpy and bumpy like this. Some of you know what we're talking about. It's going to be nice and smooth. A lot of people sew their zippers in separately. You want to try that. A lot of people actually like that better than taping it. Real reason why we showed you this is if you have one that's broken, you might be able to fix it like this. See, it's those little things that nobody ever tells you about, needles and chalk and stuff like that. That's another thing I like about that Sew New sewing book. If you notice, every few pages of the Sew New sewing book, there's a little square box in there with all those little things in it nobody ever tells you about. Where do you think all these little hints come from, these little square boxes? It comes from all the sewers in the country. There's thousands of those little hints in there. A lot of sewing books, most of the sewing books don't have those little hints. There's thousands of those things in there. What's even more important than that is all the new tools and gadgets are listed in here. Now, a lot of you come to class because you have a problem with slacks. There's going to be 3 ways you can use to make perfectly fitting slacks. Or there's 3 different pattern making systems, and 2 of them we already covered. The first pattern making system you can use, we've taught you about in the first hour and 10 minutes of the class. You can use the system with the miniatures. We covered this method in the first hour and 10 minutes. You should all know how to make slacks with the system. It's the same procedure as the waistcoat. Exact same procedure. Except for you have to remember to put the tack on the scale according to your hip number. The other difference is you need to use the tailor's curve when you line your slacks in. You need to use your tailor's curve when you line your slacks in so you get the right curves on your slacks. In the system, there's 20 to 25 sets of slacks for men, women, and children. You understand all the style slacks are here? So you can make perfect slacks with the system. I know that'll get you better results. There's even a videotape that goes with this method. You understand this videotape goes with this method of pattern making so you can finally make a pair of slacks that fits? One custom fit pair of slacks has got to be worth $94. So you can make perfectly fitting slacks with the system. We covered that in the first part of the class. The video covers it for you also. Now what's the other pattern making system that we told you about? We didn't really cover it, but we told you about it, is pattern making from scratch, which is the long way. Remember I was telling you that one of our instructors has 10 years of specialized schooling? She took the time to put together the designing booklets. Remember in design book 3, she shows you how to make a sloper for your skirt. Shows you how to make the sloper for the skirt. Then she goes on at the end here and tells you how to make a sloper pattern for your slacks. Remember, this is the long way to pattern making. You can make a pattern a long way if you want like this. It just takes longer than using the system with the miniatures. You know why we really have the designing booklets? It isn't so much for the pattern making from scratch, although you can do it this way if you want to. It's just going to take longer doing it the other way. Why we really have the designing booklets, it's more for the designing procedures that she had put in here. So this is the long way to pattern making. More important, it's all the designing procedures for skirts and slacks. Now you have two ways for slacks. You can use the system with the miniatures, or you can pattern making from scratch, which is the long way. Now there's only one other method you can use for slacks. There's only one other method that we know about. You can use the bond fit slack pattern or the adjustable master pattern. I call it the adjustable master sloper pattern for women's pants. What's the purpose for running a master sloper pattern for women's pants? Any size, any style women's pants can be made from this pattern. Now how this method works, it's totally different than the other two ways we've shown you. Totally different method altogether. How this works is very simple. It's a hard plastic master pattern. It's in pieces. Now obviously this is straight leg slack right here. Wouldn't this be a straight leg? Now it comes from Europe, so all these numbers on here are going to be centimeter numbers. All these numbers are centimeters. You loosen all little knobs up. You know, you see how when you loosen all little knobs up, how it pulls all apart? Now it's the adjustable master sloper pattern. What do you do with it now? You start measuring yourself with your tape measure. You measure your waist. Let's say you're 82 centimeters at the waist. You just pull this apart till your waist measurement 82 shows up in a little window. 82, 82. When your waist measurement shows up in a little window, you tighten this down at the waist. Now you have a pattern correct width at the waist, that fast. After you set the waist, you come down and set the width of the leg. If you set the width of the leg to whatever your waist measures, in this case 82, if you set the width of the leg to 82, that gives you basic straight leg slack. You can make the legs as wide or as narrow as you want to, but if you set it to the width of the waist, you have basic straight leg slack. Now you look and see what the hip curve says. It says the hip curve is 107 centimeters. The number that shows up there is okay for most of you. After you set your waist width of your leg, measure straight around like you normally do. Let's say you have big hips and you're 112. How do you make the hip bigger without changing the waist width of the leg? Well, you see this hip enlargement panel? See the hip enlargement panel? You just slide this out 5 numbers. 107 and 5 is 112. You tighten the hip curve up. See how you made the hip bigger without changing the waist width of the leg? Now you also have crotch depth. The crotch depth is this point here. Now she tells you in the instruction page how to measure and set the crotch depth. Let's say after you've read the paragraph of instructions and you measured, you found out you have to set your crotch depth to 90. You slide this out, your crotch depth 90 shows up in a little window. You just tighten your crotch depth up. Now your crotch depth is set. Now you also have crotch height. Now for crotch height, you just trace the top half of the master sloper pattern on your paper or your fabric. From point A, you see this point A here, to point B over here. You see this point B? Point A to point B. Trace the top half on your paper or your fabric. Point A, point B. Now the crotch height starts right here at 58 centimeters, and it goes all the way up to 102 centimeters. See, there are the grading lines for the crotch height, 58 to 102. See these grading lines? Now she tells on the instruction page how to measure and set that. Let's say after you've read the paragraph of instructions and you measured, you found out you have to set your crotch height to 100. You drop the master sloper pattern down to the crotch line 100, shows up at dot A. Now you complete your crotch height. You already have the depth out there. You shove it over, complete the other side seam. See, what you're doing in this method is totally different. You're moving the pieces in or out, or up or down, till your measurements show up in those little windows, those little boxes. And then you hook your legs on there. Now there's a place to hook them on there, but I'm not going to waste the time that isn't necessary. 45 minutes later at the longest, this is what you have. You have a pattern that has the correct width at the waist, correct crotch height front and back. Crotch will be centered in the middle of your body. You have the correct width on the hip, the leg, and the correct overall length. No cutting, adjusting, slashing, spreading, taping, hoping it fits. If you measure right, it does work. Now it has 2 fronts. Why would it have 2 fronts? With a dart and without a dart. You know, like for elasticized waist, tucks, pleats, and gathers. You have the back crotch. Now look at the back crotch. See how the back crotch curve is a little lower and it's a lot wider. See, this pattern is engineered with what's called the European cut to the shape of the crotch. Just like all the patterns you make from the system, they've been engineered with the European cut to the shape of the crotch. So it eliminates the loops and wrinkles and bags and sags you get up through here and back through here on a ready-made pattern, because the crotch has been engineered with a much better shape for you. You have the pocket, little placket for the zipper. I don't spend any more time on this method. For those of you who would like to make perfectly fitting slacks with the adjustable master sloper pattern, you should be able to see the value in this already. If it were in Sears or Kmart, it's not in any store, but if it were, and if you were to get one, it would take about 45 minutes the first time you do it. It would take you 45 minutes to read this page of instructions front. Notice it's mostly front, with little pictures with little paragraphs underneath the pictures, and back to make sure you're working it right. Reason I briefly explain how it works, not only take you a half hour. Yeah, but how are you going to know how to draw the styles off it? How would you know how to draw the styles off it? Remember, any size, any style woman's pants comes from this pattern. Most important thing in the pants kit, besides the adjustable master sloper pattern, is the designer that owns the master pattern for pants. She wrote an 18-page booklet. And what does the 18-page booklet tell you? She tells you how to make any 18-page booklet on pants. It tells you how to make any type of waist, any kind of leg. Shorts, culottes, gaucho pants, blue jeans, Slim Jim cigarette pants. Any size, any style woman's pants can be made from this pattern. We've had this. You can also use it to adjust your ready-made commercial pattern by laying it on top of it. I don't know why you want to do that when you'd make them right from here. We've had this in the class for 11 years. I've had people that have bought this at previous classes that come back wearing the slacks that they had made from it, looking. So that's the adjustable master sloper pattern for pants. That's another way to make a pattern. Now you have 3 ways to make slacks that fit. If you have a problem with pants, it's another answer for you.
Today I will take you step by step through the entire process of making a pair of slacks using the Letterloh system. This method originated in Germany over 60 years ago. It enables anyone, whether a novice or an expert, to draft a pattern to fit. This eliminates those time-consuming adjustments that are otherwise necessary. The thought of making slacks to fit can frighten even some of the best seamstresses. I myself had not made slacks in probably 15 or 20 years because most early attempts had produced slacks I either could not or would not wear. In fact, I have trouble buying ready-made slacks that fit. If the hips fit, the waist is 3 inches too big, the legs are 6 inches too long, and when hemmed, the bottom is way too big around. So I was very skeptical about a system that promised perfect fit based on 1 or 2 measurements. I had made dresses, jackets, even coats using the Letterloh pattern, but for the first 2 years after I purchased the system, I still avoided slacks. Finally, one day, with an inexpensive piece of material I didn't mind wasting if it didn't work, I decided to try it. To my surprise, the slacks fit perfectly. Now, I'll show you how to do the same thing. In slacks, we work mostly with 1 measurement, the largest measurement below the waist. Where this is will vary on different people. Using a centimeter tape, like the one which came with your system, you want to take 3 measurements below the waist. Take your first measurement just slightly below the waist. Keep your finger on the spot. Move down. Take a second measurement. Move down still further. Take a third measurement. You're going to use the largest of these 3 measurements. The reason so many people have difficulty making slacks to fit is that every commercial pattern is shaped a little differently. Try taking 3 slack patterns and superimposing one on top of the other, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. What this means is that with every pair of slacks you make, you need to do a lot of adjustments. With the Letterloh patterns, Every pattern is sized consistently, so you don't have that problem. Once you have the measurement in centimeters, you want to go to the scale, place your pin in the scale at the number you found to be your largest measurement, place the pin and the scale in your pattern, which you've already taped down to vellum paper, at the cross in the middle of this pattern piece. Then you rotate that tape and scale and follow the little lines that come out from the pattern piece and place a mark on your paper. You continue to rotate the scale around the pattern, making the marks at the proper places. Follow each line out the tape and scale. Do this for each of the pattern pieces. Once you've made all of your dots all the way around the pattern, then it's time to connect the dots. Using the crotch curve, line up your top 3 dots, draw the line, move slightly so that your dots line up, and finish your line. Use the inseam curve to do the inseam. Again, getting your lines, your dots to line up, draw the line. Use the hip curve for the hip side. You have a straight area at the pocket. And across the waist. Draw in the extension for the zipper. Finish the leg lines and do this for each of the pattern pieces. Then you want to draw in the pleats and darts. In this case, we're with the front, so it's tucks. Now it's time to check the waist measurement. Measure around your waist and add 1 inch for ease. Then measure your pattern pieces, not counting the pleats and the darts. Double that measurement. Remember, you don't have a seam allowance, so you're not measuring into that area. You measure right to the edge. Okay, once you've doubled that, if that measurement does not equal your waist measurement, you need to make some alterations. If you need to add or subtract less than 2 inches, you're going to do it at the center back. And you simply measure on, add on what you need. For example, if you need 1 inch more, you'd add 1/2 inch because you're working with 2 pieces of material. And you would simply redraw that line and redraw the crotch curve. If you need to add more than 2 inches, you can also work with the side seams, adding or subtracting a little bit on the side seams. Do the crotch measurements next. To get the crotch height, sit on a table, measure from your waist to the table. That will give you the crotch height, which is the equivalent of the crotch measurement on your pattern to the waist. The next thing you need is the crotch depth. In order to get the crotch depth, the best way is to tape 2 tape measures together and then tape onto that something that can hang freely and add a weight, such as keys. Once you have that, you step into your tapes bringing it up to the crotch area, leaving about an inch of ease. Place your finger on the tape measure, stepping into it so that you can bring it up to the back as well. Again, keep your finger on the back measurement at the waist. Step out of it and record the two measurements, the front crotch depth and the back crotch depth. Once you have the crotch depth measurement, you'll lay your tape along the crotch line and check to see if it matches. If it doesn't, if you need to add, make your new dot and you'll simply redraw that line using your curves. Do the same on the back piece. Then the last thing to check is the length of your pattern piece. If you need it longer or shorter, you'll adjust it at the point where the cross was. You can cut that across and either lengthen or shorten and redraw your side seam. Cut your pattern pieces and lay them on the material and pin them down. Then you're ready to cut the fabric to make your slacks. The easiest way to do that is with the rotary cutter and guide arm, because as your guide arm runs along the cut line of your pattern, the cutting blade is going to be adding the seam allowance at the same time. So you've already added your seam allowance. You do this with all of your pattern pieces, cut them out completely, and then you're ready to move to the sewing machine. First, sew the tucks in the front slacks piece. Bring the straight lines together, right sides together, and stitch. Reverse a little where you start to hold your line. When you get to the end, pivot out just a little bit. This helps to add some fullness. Do each of the tucks the same way on both front pieces. Now, if you needed to alter the waist, you could do a little bit of changing here as well. When those are sewn in, press the tucks to the side seam. The next step is the pocket bags. When you're actually cutting your fabric, you can make the pockets out of lining material. You would want to cut 2 pieces of the entire pocket, and then you want 2 more pieces out of the lining that eliminate this corner area so that you just have the slant that goes up along the slacks front. Using that piece that's cut on the slant, the front of your slacks pocket is cut on an angle and therefore will have some stretch, so it needs to be stabilized. What you do is, with your pocket piece, you're going to cut another strip of material out of your slack fabric and position that on top of, so that you have right side up of your pocket and right side up of your fabric right along that edge. To keep that in place, you'll just zigzag along the edge piece in the middle of the pocket. Place this completed piece right sides together onto the slack front. Make sure they're lined up. Then put a piece of seam tape right along where the seam line is going to be. This helps to stabilize that seam so that it doesn't stretch. Then you're ready to sew all of those together. Once you have that sewn, if you have a wide seam, you'll want to trim it to 1/4 of an inch. Press that seam open so you don't get that little ditch when you do your top stitching. Then turn it under and top stitch. You'll want to use a longer stitch, change the stitch length, and top stitch along that seam. This gives a nice finished look to the edge of your slacks pockets. What you're seeing here is the completed side pocket insertion. In order to do that, you're going to take the full pocket piece, and just as you did with the straight facing piece, you're going to put your side pocket insertion right on top of the pocket. This is the back part of the pocket, which you see on the front of your slacks. You simply zigzag that in place. Then position it onto the side of the slacks. It may not always lay just exactly smooth, but that will be taken care of later when you do the side seams. Just pin it into place. Now you're ready to insert the zipper. You're going to start by putting your fronts together, right sides together, and sew the crotch seam. At the lower end of this, you'll want to use a small stitch, short stitch, because this is a stress area. When you get to the overlap and underlap area, you'll want to lengthen the stitch to a basting stitch. This is the area where the zipper is going to go. This will just hold it together while you're sewing. Just follow right up the line. Press that center front seam open. Then when you're putting your zipper in, you want to use a zipper that is longer than your seam. That way you can stitch right up to the top and you don't have to worry about the slider getting in the way. You'll have a nice straight seam. Lady slacks go right over left. The left is the underlap, the right is the overlap. What you're going to do on your zipper is use double-sided basting tape and fasten it to the zipper. You attach right to the top line where it's going to meet the top of your material, not all the way to the top of the zipper. You put it zipper tape down on the facing side of the left side or the underlap of the zipper. Then you want to peel off the tape that's closest to the facing side. Peel it off so that the tape stays on the zipper. And then this gets put down. Line up the other side of the zipper with the seam in the center. and press that down. That bases it into place. Okay, see, that's fastened down onto the facing. Then you're ready to stitch that. You always want to stitch directionally on your zipper from top to bottom. Now this is the trickiest part of putting your zipper in. You want to peel off the other side of the tape and pull this all the way over to the other side of the facing. Make sure you have it pushed over from underneath. Okay, and fasten that down onto the facing. Then you're ready to stitch again, very close to the teeth. You can take care of any of the ravelly parts of your facing with an overlock or with a zigzag. You want to stitch close to the teeth from the top to the bottom with the zipper face down. It's important to keep your zipper bottom above that extension at the end of your facing, so that when you stitch later around the curve, you're not going to catch into that metal and break a needle. The last step here is to top stitch. Make a template of your stitching line, lay it on the front, on the right side. Make sure you're below the bottom stop of the zipper so you're not going to stitch through it. And just mark that stitching line. Stitch from the top down on the outside using a regular presser foot and a longer stitch length. Keep it smooth and stitch around the curve at the bottom. When you get to the seam, change the needle width to about 1.5, the stitch length very short, and then bar tack across the corner. Then take out your basting thread. Most purchased slacks have a zipper shield. Using the same pattern you used for the top stitching, make a top and a bottom facing piece out of your slack fabric, adding seam allowance. Stitch around the curved area edge. You can use about 1/4 of an inch seam allowance here. Then notch the edges so that you can turn it easily. You'll turn this piece inside out. And it's a good idea to press it. Then once you have it pressed, I'll just switch pieces here to one that's pressed. You want to top stitch, again, lengthen your stitch and top stitch fairly close to the edge of the piece where the fold is. To keep the cut edge from fraying and raveling, you can either overcast it with a serger, or for our purposes here, we'll just simply zigzag along the edge. And now your zipper shield is ready to be installed. The zipper shield lays behind the back side of the zipper, the facing side, and this part goes toward the right side so that you're stitching on the underlap or left side. You want to lay this in place and pin it so it's not going to slide. And you'll be sewing through all thicknesses, and you can sew from the right side. You want to use a zipper foot so that you can get close to the zipper extension. Sew the back darts, starting at the top to the point. When you get to about a ½ inch from the point, shorten your stitch and gently stitch off for about an inch. Then press the back darts to the center. The inseams are next. Keep the back of the garment down next to the feed dog. The feed eases the seam. Keep the cut edges together. Just above the knee, start stressing the fabric a little as you sew. Next is the side seams. Again, keep the back of the garment down and smooth over the pocket area. On the crotch area, there's no ease allowed. They must match exactly. Keep the layers together. It's best to use a walking foot. Cross all your inseam lines and stitch to the top of the back of the pants. The waistband is the actual measurement of your waist plus the extensions that you're going to have on your waistband. You want a good interfacing in the waistband. You can iron on interfacing like Waist Shaper, which gives you automatically the fold and the extension. You want to mark your center back and center front on the waistband so you know how much ease to allow when you start putting this on. All right, you begin by putting right sides together and pin this in place. Center back. Remember that your darts are going to press toward the center back. Be sure you're leaving enough extension on the overlap side. Keep the pants down next to the feed dog and the waistband on top. Keep your left hand free to be sure you aren't getting any pleats. Keep the proper ease in the band and be sure the tucks press to the side seams. When you stitch across the zipper tape, turn the hand wheel slowly so you don't break a needle. Trim the seam line and press up. The remainder of the zipper tape can be cut off. The most difficult part is keeping the overlap and the underlap smooth. All right, you want to zip up the front to make sure that your seams match at the top. Then on your extension, clip up to the stitching line. Fold these back on the folding line, and you'll sew from the end of the extension in the seam line. Trim it. Clip your corner, and you'll be ready to turn. Okay, on the underlap side, again, clip to the seam line, turn back. Only this time you'll stitch straight up from the end of that zipper extension. Cut the excess. And turn. Now we can turn these right side out. And when you turn this, you'll be putting the button hole on the long extension and then your button on the short end. And you're ready to stitch the facing of the waistband down. The facing side of the waistband can be turned under and zigzagged. And on the top side, you'll stitch what's called in the ditch, right along the old seam line. This holds the band down in place. All that remains now is to add a button and buttonhole, hem the bottom of your pants, press them good, and you have a new pair of slacks that fit perfectly.